Chapter 750. We have to solve the problem of ventilation and sunlight. Once it snows heavily, we have to clean it up in time. Not only can we let the sunlight shine, but we can't let the heavy snow collapse the greenhouse. Yang Qindong introduced his experience to you, Mian and the 100 old farmers. Although these old farmers were veterans in planting crops, the climate in Crimson City was different from that of the first city. He still had to list out the things to take note of one by one. Yu Mian and the old farmers listened with shining eyes. They had nothing but admiration for Yang Qindong. This sixth young master acted as if there was nothing that he didn't know. Anything that was placed in front of him was no longer a problem. Yang Qindong left the matter of planting in the greenhouse to Yu Mian and these experienced old farmers. Instead, he turned around and focused his energy on military training. As mentioned before, the weather in the grasslands would be cold for nearly half a year. How could the army get used to fighting in the cold weather? This was the focus of military training. Send a message to Crimson City and ask them to make more military cotton coats and light down jackets. Tell them that the quality must be good. If anyone dares to use inferior cotton to make up the numbers, they will bring their heads to see me. Yang Qindong said to Beta Persei, who was following beside him. He still remembered that such a thing had happened to the National Army. In the cold weather, the soldiers wore cotton-padded clothes made of cotton without cotton and inferior black cotton. In the end, who knew how many people had frozen to death and frostbite? Such a mistake could never happen to him. If anyone dared to do so, they would be waiting to die. Inform Crimson City to make some hot water belts. Make sure that everyone has one. Didn't I tell them that the frostbite cream I gave them last time was already developed? Then mass produce it. All the anti-cold items should also be prepared. Yang Qindong listed out a bunch of items. This was what it meant to prepare for a rainy day. Opportunities were always given to those who were prepared, and you had to be prepared. In the first city, preparations were also being made to welcome the arrival of winter. One after another, fireplaces were built by Wu Hua and the other blacksmiths and installed in the homes of the common people. What was worth being happy about was that Yang Qindong also found an underground coal mine not far from the first city, according to his memory. Once he had this thing, it would not be difficult to keep warm in winter. At that time, the people here would go through their first warm winter together. It would be a very pleasant and joyful thing. Datong Military Headquarters. As Baiming's first line of defense against Walla's army, Commander Sun Hong felt a lot of pressure. He had sent letters to Baiming's capital 5 times to request for reinforcements, while complaining about the bad situation. He also requested the imperial court to send reinforcements. On the surface, they were constantly writing memorials asking for help, but in their hearts, they were cursing Shi Heng's nephew Shi Biao's 8 generations of ancestors. If it weren't for this person's insatiable greed, which eventually disrupted the cooperation between Baiming's business group and Walla, how could the border be tense and the flames of war be raging? When he thought that the Walla's army led by Yeshen had occupied the Hetao area and could attack Datong's mansion at any time, Sun Hong couldn't help but have an impulse to pull out his sword and kill people. It was just that now Shi Heng was deeply trusted by Zhu Qiyu. He had changed from Wuqing Count to Wuqing Marquis, and at the same time, he was also the commander of Baiming. He was in charge of all the military affairs and was already Sun Hong's superior. This suddenly made Sun Hong feel a sense of powerlessness. And just when Hetao had become Walla's possession, and it seemed that Datong's mansion would face a war at any time and might even be lost at any time, the other parties suddenly stopped. The domineering Walla suddenly became so honest, which was naturally beyond Sun Hong's expectation. At first, he suspected that the other party was preparing for a war, or even preparing to transfer more Walla cavalry to participate in the war. But when he sent out all the scouts, the news he received was the opposite. Not only did Yeshen not increase the troops in the direction of Datong, but he sent a part of the cavalry to defend the Mongolian area in the northeast. Could it be that something happened on the grassland again? Or was Tuachuo Buhua making a comeback? Sun Hong was naturally clear about the matter of Yeshen cooperating with Agar Dorji to deal with Tuachuo Buhua. It was precisely because he was clear that he thought so. Therefore, he sent out some scouts to further places to gather information. More than 2 months after this person was sent out, he finally returned with news. The answer turned out to be that the Duke of Loyalty suddenly appeared on the grassland and built a first city. He continuously fought with Agar Dorji and Mabe Mongol and won both. Sun Hong was originally the deputy chief of Datong and had always been guarding the border. He had only heard of the Duke of Loyalty but had never met him, but he had heard a lot about his glorious achievements. He also knew that although this person was young, his talent in business was amazing, especially when it came to leading troops to war. He was actually outstanding among people. Previously, when Baiming's capital was in danger, it was he who brought a few mercenaries and some people from the capital's 5 cities warden's office to defeat the powerful Walla cavalry. Later, he also made Yeshen give in, and the two sides had business relations, which bought a lot of time for Baiming's development. Later, there was a rebellion in the south of the southern Ming dynasty, and it was this Duke of Loyalty who not only stopped and eliminated the rebellion, but also took down 2 small countries, Jiaoji and Lancang, and established a province there. This action was clearly to establish the power of an independent country. It was said that this action made many officials in the court furious. Many memorials were sent, but in the end, it was like a stone sinking into the sea. Regarding this, Sun Hong could understand. After all, Jiaoji and Lancang were too far away from Baiming. If they wanted to send troops to eliminate them, they would have to pass through the southern Ming dynasty. How could Zhu Qiyu agree? Not to mention, even if they did send troops, it was still unknown whether they could defeat the mercenaries. The turmoil in the south made Baiming feel like it was sitting on pins and needles, but there was nothing it could do. It had to be said that this Duke of Loyalty was amazing. However, he did not expect that he would suddenly appear in the grasslands again. In such a short period of time, he had made such a big name there. No one dared to underestimate him. Of course, after understanding and knowing all this, Sun Hong was still somewhat happy. He was only a chief of the Datong army. Although he controlled the military power of 50,000 soldiers, he was still a martial artist. It was difficult for him to enter the eyes of those sage-like officials in the court. In his eyes, there was only the 3 acres of land in front of him. As long as Datong was safe, it was equivalent to him completing his duty. The appearance of the Duke of Loyalty could intimidate Walla's troops, which was beneficial to him. This was enough. Sun Hong was happy, but such important news still needed to be reported to the court. He immediately wrote a memorial and sent it to Baiming's capital. Not long after, Baiming also sent a decree. The decree was directly sent to Sun Hong and the guarding eunuch, Zhang Quan. Zhang Quan was a eunuch. During the coup of Tumu, the previous guarding eunuch, Guijing, died in battle. He was sent here to replace him. Compared to Sun Hong, this person had a close relationship with many eunuchs in Baiming's capital. If one had to say that he had a relationship with the higher-ups, Sun Hong was probably more than 1 level lower. When the decree was issued, the general idea was for Sun Hong and Zhang Quan to find a way to contact the Duke of Loyalty and ask him to contribute to Baiming's border chaos. If possible, they should even hand over the origin city to the great Ming dynasty's army. They should even hand over the military power of the mercenaries there. After reading the emperor's decree, Sun Hong and Zhang Quan both shook their heads. Who was the Duke of Loyalty? How could he be so easy to get along with? Did they really think that he was an ordinary official of the Great Ming dynasty, just based on the fact that he was able to defeat Agar Dorji's 50,000 cavalry and force the Mongol cavalry to cross the Inma River just based on these 2 points? How could they be willing to submit to others? Just based on the fact that the Datong government only had 50,000 soldiers, how could they make the other party bow their heads, let alone make them hand over their military power? Sun Hong did not have a better idea, and Zhang Quan also had the same idea. The scholars of the Ming dynasty were very united, and the important officials would sometimes work together for their own interests, often forcing the emperor to give in. Under such circumstances, the development of the eunuchs was inevitable. In order to maintain the balance, both Zhu Qijin and Zhu Qiyu chose the same method, which was to promote and use the eunuchs to suppress the development of the scholars. Under such circumstances, the authority of the eunuchs became more and more important, to the point where few officials dared to not give them face. Even in the Great Tong Prefecture, Sun Hong still had to look at the face of the eunuch Zhang Quan. Eunuchs were a great threat to ordinary officials, but there were also exceptions. For example, the Duke of Loyalty, Yang Qindong, was the most typical example. It was said that when he first became the Duke of Loyalty, any eunuch who dared to call himself the Duke would be dealt with by Yang Qindong, the real Duke. After that, the eunuch group could not do anything to him. Just based on this point, Zhang Quan's power was not in the eyes of the other party at all. Sun Hong sighed, and so did Zhang Quan. Both of them had a sad look on their faces, but since the emperor had given the decree, they had to complete it. In the end, after thinking about it, Zhang Quan decided to go to Shi City. He wanted to see the situation there with his own eyes, so he could give an explanation to the higher-ups. Sun Hong was naturally happy that Zhang Quan was willing to go. He immediately decided to send Qianhu Su Dei and his men to escort him all the way to ensure his safety. Immediately, a cavalry team of more than 1,000 people left Great Tong and went all the way to the northeast. Zhang Quan came. Whether it was to find out the truth or to find out the truth, Yang Qindong did not care too much for the time being. One of the main reasons why Shi City had to be built was to shock the Beiming imperial court. Chapter 751. The establishment of Vietnam and Laos was indirectly tantamount to a falling out with Beiming and Southern Ming. Anyone with a clear head could see his ambition. They just didn't want to act rashly because of the strength he had shown. In the eyes of others, this was enough to be proud of, but in Yang Qindong's eyes, it was far from enough. He didn't forget that there were still 2 madams in Beiming's capital. Back then, they were there to be hostages, so that the emperor of Beiming, Zhu Qiyu, wouldn't suspect him. Moreover, his brothers and sisters were all in the capital of the Northern Ming dynasty. Normally, he couldn't see the existence of these people, but if he really did tear off all pretense of cordiality, they might become his weak points. The Security Bureau had already sent a message. Whether it was the immortal abode in the capital, the residences of his brothers and sisters in heaven beyond heaven, or even the Yang family manor 15 li south of the city, the embroidered uniform guards, spies, could often be seen. They were watching these people to send a message to Yang Qindong. Don't go too far. Otherwise, these family members could be in trouble at any time. With these embroidered uniform guards watching, Yang Qindong couldn't send all his family members out of Beiming's capital at the same time. For the safety of his family members and to give Beiming enough deterrence, Yang Qindong chose to build a city in the northeast of Beiming, which was the origin city. This place wasn't like the south of Southern Ming, where there were countries big and small for him to conquer and form enough influence. Since this was the case, he would build a new city here and have a force to threaten Beiming's imperial court so that they wouldn't dare to do anything to his family members. the establishment of the origin city didn't go against Yang Qindong's original intention when he came here. Its construction and existence had effectively deterred Wara. According to the Security Bureau, Yes Hen had become much more well-behaved. After occupying the Hatao region, he did not launch an attack on Datong Prefecture. He had achieved his initial strategic goal, which was to maintain the balance between Baiming and the grassland tribes. Now, what he needed to do was to make the first city even more powerful, so that no one or any force would dare to have any ideas about it. As long as the origin city existed for a day, it would form a great deterrence to all the surrounding forces. As time passed, this deterrence would achieve the goal of subduing the enemy without fighting. At least, it would be much easier to deal with than before. This was a relationship that complemented each other. The development of the first city had become the most important thing in Yang Qindong's eyes. Of course, building and developing the first city was only the first step. Next, Yang Qindong needed to do more things, such as continue to expand his territory and influence. In order to achieve the huge goal of the Han people walking at the top of the world in the future, whether it was Baiming or Southern Ming, Yang Qindong had no intention of conquering by force now. It was even possible that he would have to avoid large-scale attacks in the future. However, when it came to the land outside of northern Ming, he didn't have so many concerns. The problem was, if he wanted to expand, who should he choose as his next military target? After thinking about it, Yang Qindong's gaze fell on the northeast, on the land of Russia ruled by the Golden Horde. The Golden Horde was one of the few remaining Golden Horde families with the purest bloodline in the Mongolian forces. If he could take them down, whether it was to expand his power or to deter them, it would be of great significance. Think about it. Even the Golden Horde of Mongolia was defeated by the mercenaries. In a psychological sense, wouldn't the mercenaries be invincible? There was another important reason that made Yang Qindong make this decision. After more than 200 years of development, the current Golden Horde was no longer as strong as before. Now was the time to go downhill. According to the development of history, even if he didn't make a move, the Golden Horde would be destroyed by the rising power of Russia in less than 20 years. Since that was the case, there was nothing to worry about. Taking advantage of the situation was the best time to take action. In order to achieve the goal of severely injuring or even destroying the Golden Horde, Yang Qindong had already begun to formally consider which army would set off from the first city for the expedition. Logically speaking, the best person to lead an expedition was himself. In his previous life, he had been there countless times in order to complete missions, so he was very familiar with the language there. He also had a better grasp of some of the situation and terrain there compared to others. However, the first city had just been built and hadn't experienced the test of a cold winter. He was really worried about going far away now. In addition, the expeditionary army had just set off and had to travel thousands of miles to fight the enemy. It would take a long time to achieve success. Even if he went now, he might not be able to achieve success immediately. It was better to send other troops first. They could explore the path and also take the opportunity to find the shortcomings of the army. But even if he sent troops, facing a huge monster like the Golden Horde, the strength of the troops sent was not enough. It would just be a joke. After thinking about it, Yang Qindong decided to send the 3 divisions of the Cold Front to the front line. The 3 divisions of the Cold Front mainly used the 95 style. They also had the steel crossbow, which was a sharp weapon in close combat. The individual quality of the soldiers was also very good. They were Yang Qindong's trump card in the north. In addition, the division commander Wu Sheng and the political commissar Chen Bo had been working together for a long time. The strengths and advantages of the two could complement each other. It was enough to ensure that they would calmly deal with problems under any circumstances and would not be rash. No matter how one looked at it, they were the most suitable candidates to be sent to battle. Of course, the 3 divisions of the Cold Front were not enough. There was also the Nuzan Cavalry Division. In addition, the number of troops reached 10,000. Only then would they be able to deal with the encirclement and siege of some large armies. The reason why he sent the Nuzan Cavalry Division and not other cavalry divisions was because of the Golden Horde. That was because the so-called Mongol Golden Family brought a lot of pressure to the Mongol army. However, when facing the priestess, the pressure would be reduced to the minimum. On the contrary, because of the many years of suppression, the 2 sides were like fire and water. Only by sending the Nuzan Cavalry Division would they be able to unleash more combat power. To them, this could be considered a battle of revenge. How could they not use their full strength? After making the decision, Yang Qindong began to personally train the 3 divisions of the Cold Front and the Nuzan Cavalry Division. In particular, he gave some advanced guidance on how to fight in cold weather and heavy snow. He even took out the skis. The skis that he made himself were put to use at the end of October, the beginning of November, when the first snow fell on the plains. Yang Qindong stepped on the skis and walked on the snow. His light posture and extreme speed stunned everyone. First, there was the appearance of the bicycle. The 6th young master was the one who rode it the fastest. Next, the skis were invented and demonstrated by the 6th young master. This made everyone respect Yang Qindong even more. In their hearts, they wanted to ask, was there anything in this world that their 6th young master could not do? In the land of ice and snow, with skis, the army could move faster. Not only that, when another batch of supplies arrived, many white cloaks appeared. Yang Qindong put them on, and his entire person seemed to blend into the white snow in an instant. These cloaks were not as big and eye-catching as the cloaks worn by officers above the regiment level. However, they could be used to hide one's figure and were the best disguise. If the enemy did not keep an eye on them and did not have information beforehand, they would not be able to see them even if they slipped under their noses. All right, you have the equipment. You can train with it now. When you are done training and the army departs, the young master, will personally send you off. Yang Qindong patted Wu Sheng, Chen Bo, and the others on the shoulders before turning around and walking out of the training ground. Wu Sheng and Chen Bo were both very excited about Yang Qindong's favor, and the fact that they were allowed to lead their troops into battle alone. Speaking of which, from the 3rd Regiment to the 3rd Division of the Cold Front, they had always been by Yang Qindong's side. Rather than saying that they had won every battle, it was more accurate to say that it was the 6th young master's good command and battle plans. Now, the fledglings could finally fly freely in the sky. How could the 2 of them not be excited? This did not mean that they did not want to be under Yang Qindong's command anymore. It was just that they wanted to prove their abilities. There was already news that the Cold Front was considering forming an army. It was very likely that the first army would be built in the rear headquarters, Qiqian City. The first commander would also be Lung Song, the former commander of the 1st Division. Since they were going to form an army, both Wu Sheng and Chen Bo would not be limited to the position of a division commander and political commissar. They also wanted to take a step forward and become a commander from a division commander. In order to achieve this goal, they would need to put in more effort and gain more military merits. Only when they were free to command in battle would they be able to unleash their full potential. In order to achieve this goal, Yang Qindong had just left the training ground when Wu Sheng's voice rang out. Train hard, train as hard as you can. Try to familiarize yourself with using skis as soon as possible and make a name for yourself. Yang Qindong did not need to worry about the enthusiasm of the army's training. Not long after leaving the training ground, he arrived at the greenhouse base. More than 2 months had passed. When it was first built, It was still early autumn, but now it was already early winter. When the surroundings were covered by snow, the vegetable greenhouse base was indeed a scene of exuberant green. It was said that no matter how busy City Lord Yumian was, he would take the time to come here and take a look. It was as if his mood would become very good after seeing it. Yang Qindong would also come here every few days to see the results of his guidance. With the addition of 100 experienced farmers and some technical guidance from Yang Qindong, the green greenhouse base was developing smoothly. The moment they entered, their eyes were filled with green, giving them a feeling of joy of a harvest. Chapter 752. Sixth Young Master, we've calculated. In about half a month, some of the vegetables will be ripe and ready to be served on the table. When the experienced old farmer who stayed here saw Yang Qindong come to inspect again, he said, as if he was showing off his merit, "He good." Yang Qindong nodded in satisfaction. Looking at the patches of green in front of him, he was as happy as looking at piles of gold. It was not an exaggeration to say that the value of green vegetables in this place was not much different from gold. At this time in the past, other than the mutton that the people of the grassland ate all year round, most of the vegetables that were buried deep in the cellar, such as radishes and cabbages. Of course, because of Yang Qindong's appearance, there was now an additional potato. But no matter what, with only these few vegetables being exchanged, there would be a time when people would get tired of eating them. Now that these various varieties of green vegetables could be taken out, there was no need to worry about the sales even if they were sold at a high price. The only thing to consider was the lack of ingredients and the lack of supply. Unknowingly, Yumian also appeared in the greenhouse base with a face full of excitement. When he saw that Yang Qindong was also here, he almost jogged all the way over. "Sixth Young Master, You're really amazing." Don't flatter me." Yang Qindong smiled at Yumian. "This is not flattery. These are sincere words. If you don't believe me, you can go to the city and listen to what the people in the city say. They all see you as a god, as someone sent by Chang Tian." Yumian's words were not exaggerated. After seeing the progress of the greenhouse base, he deliberately arranged for 100 people in the city to enter the greenhouse base to observe every day. It was the appearance of these 100 people every day that turned their surprise into excitement. Then, under the word of mouth, the appearance of the greenhouse base, as well as Yang Qindong, who was the mastermind, began to be infinitely exaggerated. Until now, many people outside had said that Yang Qindong was someone sent by the everlasting heaven to help them. As a direct result, more and more commoners joined the first city, reaching nearly 50,000 people. To be able to grow from nothing to nearly 50,000 people in the grasslands in just 3 or 4 months was not as simple as it seemed. It was truly a miracle, an unprecedented feat. There weren't many people on the prairie to begin with, and each of them had their own tribes. It wasn't easy to gather everyone together. Even if you had a powerful armed force, it would be difficult to do so. After all, everyone lived far apart. No matter how powerful you were, you could always hide if you couldn't beat them. But now, these people came to the first city of their own accord. The streets in the city were so spacious, neat, and hygienic. When they walked into the house, it was cold outside, but the room was as warm as spring after the fireplace was burning. The greenhouse was green as if it was midsummer. The cavalry outside the city was full of fighting spirit, and their morale was like a song. The major restaurants in the city had opened, and sometimes they could see some programs that praised the grassland people's strength to face life and the mercenary army's bravery to kill the enemy. All of these really injected a warm current into the cold weather, and it went straight into people's hearts, making everyone really like this place. Sixth Young Master, you're right to transfer some of the female soldiers from Chichen City. It's funny that I opposed it before, afraid that these young and beautiful female soldiers would appear here and cause some chaos. Now, it seems that I didn't see the big picture enough and didn't observe things clearly enough. Whenever they performed, the restaurant would be filled to the brim. This was especially true for the newly built Immortal Abode, which was the largest restaurant in the city. Whenever the female soldiers performed, it would be even more difficult to get a seat. Thus, they had to pay quite a bit of business tax to the origin city. This made him, as the city lord, even more confident in doing things. Yu Mian sighed with emotion. Well, you're right about this. The construction of spiritual civilization is also an indispensable part of people's lives. What is happiness? It's not as simple as having enough to eat and clothes to wear. It should be more reasonable and have higher goals. Yang Chendong nodded and said a few words that made Yu Mian feel as if he had obtained a treasure. Yu Mian kept nodding and even took out a pen and paper from his body as if he was performing magic. When he saw that Yang Chendong seemed to have finished speaking, he asked for instructions again. "Sixth young master, it's winter now, and most of the people don't have anything to do. Especially after seeing the prosperity of the city, they feel that their pockets are flat and embarrassed. Some of the young and strong people are asking to join the army even louder. They have people blocking the entrance of the city lord's mansion every day. What should we do?" After everything in the first city was on the right track, Yang Chendong gave the newly built city lord's mansion to Yu Mian for his office, changing the original city lord's mansion to the Yang mansion. The people respected Yang Chendong and didn't dare to find trouble with Yang Chendong. However, when they went to the city lord's mansion, they didn't feel any burden. Sometimes, when he wanted to go out of the mansion to do things, he had to go through the side door or the back door. Listening to Yu Mian complaining, Yang Chendong nodded after hesitating for a while. With so many young and strong people having nothing to do, it was inevitable that there would be various problems after a long time. At this time, the first city must not be in chaos. Such a good situation couldn't be changed by internal chaos. How about this? We can consider recruiting. The 3 divisions of the Longfeng Division and the Nuzhen Cavalry Regiment will soon go to the north. The first city's military strength will become empty. Appropriate recruitment can also make up for our own shortcomings. However, even if we recruit, we can't use all of them. Consider setting up 3 new divisions first. I will arrange for Tiger's Mane to do the specific things. You just need to post the notice and let the people in the city know. By the way, there should be many women in the city who have nothing to do, right? Yes. When Yu Mian heard that they could recruit, he was overjoyed. When he heard Yang Chendong ask about the women at home, he felt that there must be something behind it. He immediately said, "Usually at this time, they can graze in the place they choose. However, when they enter the first city, they sell their livestock to us. A very small number of them are kept together and implement the common grazing policy. Now, more and more women are idle at home. It will be a hidden danger after a long time. Set up a textile bureau and let these women make clothes. I will send a telegram to the Red City and ask them to send the raw materials over. Also, send some experienced weavers. Although the money won't be much, it should be enough to support the family. We can also consider recruiting some young, beautiful, and versatile Mongolian women to join the propaganda team in the city. I have heard that Mongolian women are very good at dancing. Also, some programs are performed by the Mongolians themselves. It is more unique and easier to convince people. After coming up with so many ideas, Yu Mian wrote them down one by one in his notebook. Then, he hurriedly left the greenhouse base. He wanted to implement these things immediately. He believed that the people in the city would be very happy. This would also be of great help to him, the city lord, to stabilize the situation in the city. Yu Mian moved very quickly. Not long after he returned to the city lord's mansion, the notice was written and posted at the gate. This news quickly spread throughout the city. Many people were excited and encouraged by it. In a row of newly built houses in the east of the city, a pair of young men had just heard the news and were excited. "Child, what's wrong? Could it be that the messenger of immortal heaven brought some pioneering work? How can you be happy?" The person who spoke was a middle-aged woman. From her appearance, it could be seen that she must be an extremely beautiful person when she was young. At this time, wrinkles had begun to appear on her face. However, her eyes were still bright and full of spirit. With her facial features, she gave people a very amiable feeling. This woman's name was Ba Dama. In Chinese, it meant lotus. When she was young, she was a famous beauty. Later on, she married a very brave man and gave birth to a daughter, Kikij, and a son, Ba Tuesday. Originally, this was a happy family of 4. When Ba Tu was old enough, he could sell some of his sheep and horses to raise money for his son to marry a wife. However, there was an unexpected storm. During one of their herding, a group of 4 scouts under Walla Yeshen accidentally came to their door. They took a fancy to the young and beautiful Kikij and wanted to kidnap her. At the crucial moment, as the head of the family, Ba Tu's father stood up. He held a rusty cavalry sword and fought with the enemy. Using this opportunity, Ba Dama brought her children and escaped on horseback. Ba Tu's father killed 1 enemy and injured 2 others. In the end, the cavalry sword in his hand broke, and he died of exhaustion. The horses and sheep in the family were also swept away. When Ba Dama brought her children back to the herding land, only her father's body was left. The happy family became a tragedy. After losing their sheep and horses, Ba Dama left her hometown with her underage son and daughter. They walked and stopped all the way and even had to eat. In the end, they heard about the matter in the first city and came here to settle down. At this time, it had been 3 years since his father was killed. Ba Tu had grown up into a young man. Kikij was very beautiful and outstanding. However, after 3 years of running, the old mother, Ba Dama, finally collapsed from exhaustion. If Kikij and Ba Tu had not gone to the mercenary hospital in the city to ask for help, her mother would not have been able to hold on until now. The matter of Ba Tu's family was seen by some neighbors who also came to the first city to make a living and yearned for a new life. Those who had money and those who had things gave them a lot of help. There was even a wealthy Mongolian family who wanted to marry Kikij as a concubine and took out 200 taels of silver as a betrothal gift. However, he was directly rejected by Ba Dama. In her words, her children were eagles and jade rabbits on the grassland. They should not lower their heads for anything. They could earn everything with their own hands. Chapter 753. It was easy to say. The marriage was rejected because Ba Dama wanted to find a better family for her children. However, the hard days had to continue. As the only man in the family, Ba Tu went out early every morning to dig coal. It was this move that allowed the family to barely survive in the first city. However, with the arrival of winter, many things in the city had to stop. The work of digging coal was not as easy as before. They wanted to find another way, but how difficult was it to find a job? Ba Tu even tried to work as a waiter in some restaurants. However, because he was tall and strong, it was useless. The reason given was that the waiter in the restaurant was too powerful and would easily scare the customers. Days passed. If this continued, the family would not be able to supply the coal. Even the last warm place would be lost. What's more, they would not be able to afford the rent and would probably be kicked out of the first city, the City of Hope. Suddenly, a recruitment notice was posted outside the city lord's mansion, as well as the recruitment of 200 young and beautiful girls and the textile bureau in the city. Finally, the city recruited soldiers. This made Ba Tu see hope in despair. How could he not be happy? Sister Kikij also heard about the establishment of the textile bureau. She was also very excited. She could support the family with her hands and earn money to treat her mother's illness. This family should be getting better and better. No, sister, you shouldn't go to the textile bureau. Instead, you should go to the publicity team. Do you still remember that father praised your beautiful dancing more than once? When he heard that his sister was going to the textile bureau to sign up, Ba Tu immediately stopped her. Ah, can I do it? Kikich said with some lack of confidence. You can do it. At this moment, not only Ba Tu, but even her mother, Ba Dama, said at the same time. Ba Dama looked at her daughter with the loving and kind eyes of a mother and said, Kikich, Ba Tu, you are in a good era. You can do it. You can. Your father's spirit in heaven will bless you. The confident eyes of her mother and brother made Kikij have an idea. She gathered her courage and said, Well, I will give it a try. If it really doesn't work, I will go to the textile bureau to find a job. Kikich didn't have much confidence. Even though she was very beautiful, she didn't dare to have any hope for anything lucky. However, happiness suddenly fell on her head, making her feel as if she hadn't woken up yet. There weren't many people signing up for the publicity office in the city. Perhaps there were too many people like Kikich who didn't have confidence in themselves. This allowed her to gain quite a bit of advantage. With her appearance, she stood out among the line of people waiting to be assessed. Reality proved that her luck wasn't bad. She caught the eye of the head of the propaganda department, Shui Qing. Shui Qing was originally a female official in Crimson Nest City's Enchuan department and was highly valued by the department head, Wan Xiaoyu. This time, when he learned that it was the sixth young master who had personally given the order, he immediately sent out his trusted subordinate. Reality proved that Shui Qing didn't disappoint. After coming to the beginning city, she quickly understood what had happened here. Then, she chose some of the most representative stories and arranged them into a program. Once it was performed, there were a lot of good reviews. It also gave the publicity office a good start. All the work quickly entered the right path. The degree of popularity was unexpectedly good. There were more and more people in the army and among the common people who wanted to watch their program. However, the manpower in the publicity office was limited. Just when Shui Qing was thinking about whether to ask for support from the headquarters in Crimson Nest City, the sixth young master spoke. He gave them the authority to recruit 200 people to join the publicity office. This was equivalent to solving her problem. In order to complete this task well and not let down the sixth young master, Shui Qing personally acted as the examiner and recruited these 200 people. With Kikij's beautiful appearance and her good dancing foundation that she had learned from her mother since she was young, she was chosen by Shui Qing and became a new member of the publicity office. When she found out that she had been chosen and that she would be able to receive a salary of 10 taels of silver every month, and that if she performed well, there would be even more rewards, Kikij was so happy that she shed tears. She turned around and ran out. She wanted to tell this good news to her mother and brother and share it with the family. Perhaps it was because Kikij was too happy that she ran too fast. When she rushed out of the door, she didn't look at anyone or anything and bumped into a man's embrace. She couldn't help but let out a delicate cry. This wasn't because Kikij was too weak and delicate. It was because his chest was too broad and too sturdy. It was like a wall, making her feel as if a meat bump had grown on her head. What's wrong with you? Don't you look at the road when you're running? A reprimanding voice sounded. The one who spoke was one of the strong man's followers. I'm sorry. I was too anxious. I apologize. Kikich also knew that it was because she was too anxious and reckless that she bumped into someone, even though she might be the one who was injured. But the past few years of experience had made her used to swallowing her anger as she spoke. In order to show her respect, Kikich took the initiative to raise her head when she said, I apologize. This allowed her to see the person she bumped into. This person was about 9 meters tall and weighed about 200 kilograms. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was as tall as a horse. But as soon as she raised her head, Kikich immediately lowered her head, as if she didn't have the courage to look at him. She could only see the rough outline of the other party, but when she raised her head, the other party saw her clearly. So beautiful! This was the only thought in the tall man's heart. Although this woman's looks aren't as good as the other madams, she's much better than the others, especially with her tear-stained face. It's easy for people to feel pity for her. Beta Persei, who was standing there, couldn't help but think in his heart. The person who came was Beta Persei. Yang Qindong considered that today was the recruitment day of the publicity department, and wondered if anyone would come here to cause trouble. After all, there were only girls here, and it wouldn't be good if they were scared. Thus, he sent Beta Persei over to take a look. With this person here, no one would dare to cause trouble here. Unexpectedly, as soon as Beta Persei arrived, Kikich bumped into him. His skin was rough, and his flesh was thick, so of course nothing happened to him. But Kikich actually cried, which made Beta Persei feel a little embarrassed. After apologizing, Kikich didn't hear Beta Persei's response and wanted to leave. Anyway, she had already apologized. The other party was a man, so he wouldn't make things difficult for her. It was said that snatching beauties often happened in other places, but it had never been heard of in the first city, which was ruled by law. This was also the reason why her mother dared to firmly reject the neighbor who wanted to take her as a concubine. Kikich wanted to leave, and her feet involuntarily walked to the side. However, an outstretched arm blocked her. The person who stopped her was none other than Beta Persei. When he saw the other party crying, he thought that he was the one who caused it, so he wanted to apologize. Ah, what are you doing? If you continue like this, I'm going to shout for help. A big hand blocked her way, scaring Kikich so much that her whole body was about to shrink into a ball. She was already thinking about whether she should return to the publicity department. She remembered that Director Shui Qing seemed to have a good impression of her. I'm fine. I just want to ask why you're crying. Did I cause it? Well, I've been practicing martial arts all year round, so my body is a little too strong. It must have hurt you. Beta Persei faced Kikich and said incoherently. He didn't know how long it had been since he felt this way. Even when facing Yang Qindong, Beta Persei could answer smoothly most of the time and smile, as usual. But for some reason, facing a strange girl today, he actually felt a little flustered. I'm fine. Can you please move aside? After Kikich heard Beta Persei's words, she knew that he was not a bad person. But that was all. She still had urgent things to do, such as going home to report the good news. Oh. Beta Persei heard that Kikich was fine, so he put his hands down. But before the other party was about to walk past him, he suddenly straightened his arms and said, Miss, my name is Beta Persei. If you feel unwell or have other troubles, you can come to the Yang Mansion to find me. I can do my best to help. Yang Mansion? When she heard this name, Kikich finally couldn't help but raise her head again. There was no one in the beginning city who didn't know where the Yang Mansion was. It was the place where the great Ming dynasty's Duke of Loyalty and the Messenger of Tungri Heaven stayed. Those who could live there gave people a sense of mystery. She didn't expect this man to stay there. Kikich raised her head again, and Beta Persei saw her clearly again. Beautiful, you're beautiful. This was Beta Persei's second impression. Kikich seemed to feel that Beta Persei's gaze was a little hot, so she lowered her head again. Thank you for your concern. I'm fine. Can I leave now? Oh, yes, yes. Beta Persei really had no reason to stop the other party, so he had to take a step back and make enough space for Kikich to trot past him. Kikich had already left, but Beta Persei's gaze was still following her. When the figure could no longer be seen, Captain Dao Zhao's voice sounded beside him. Brother Beta Persei, she's gone. If you like, I'll send my brothers to follow her and see where she lives. What's her name? Forget it. Being teased by his brothers, Beta Persei couldn't help but blush. He then shook his head and strode into the door of the publicity office. Although he didn't send anyone to inquire about Kikich, Beta Persei still paid attention to it because he found that the girl's figure always appeared in his mind from time to time, and he couldn't let it go. Fortunately, he didn't forget what the mission was this time. He quickly entered the publicity office and came to the recruitment site. Chapter 754. As soon as he entered, his bulky figure quickly attracted the attention of many people. Director Shuiqing also saw Beta Persei at the first moment and hurriedly came over to greet him. This was the person beside the sixth young master, and he was also a popular person. He absolutely could not be offended. Brother Beta Persei, why do you have time to inspect our small yamen? Shuiqing walked over with a smile on her face. Originally, she wanted to call Beta Persei Master, just like how the people in Crimson City called Yang Wu. However, after someone called Beta Persei that way, he was scolded. What a joke! The sixth young master was only a duke. How dare they call him master? For this matter, he personally sent a telegram to Yang Wu in Crimson City, severely criticizing him. Yang Wu was also somewhat wronged. He did not request to be called Master Yang Wu, but the people below took the initiative to call him Master Yang. However, even with Beta Persei's angry reprimand, Yang Wu also asked everyone in Crimson City to call him Yang Wu in the future. If not, they could call him Brother Yang Wu. Anyway, Master Yang Wu was not allowed. Whoever called him, that could only be punished. After seeing Shuiqing, Beta Persei also asked with a smile on his face with concern, "How is it? Is everything normal here? Did anyone come to make trouble?" Why would anyone come to make trouble? This is the beginning city. Are the patrols that can be seen casually on the streets useless? Shuiqing pursed her lips and chuckled. Beta Persei also chuckled. The safety of the beginning city had always been the most important. Even if it had begun to snow, the security and defense of the city was still the same as usual. Every 10 minutes or so, a patrol of at least 10 people would appear on the streets. Not only that, the streets in the city had always been very clean. Even if the heavy snow was still falling, the snow that had covered the ground a moment ago would be swept out in the next moment. This showed how frequent the patrols were. The beginning city was surrounded by grasslands and was surrounded by Mongolians. The slightest carelessness might cause unknown things to happen. In order to achieve a deterrent effect, the patrols on the streets were more frequent. By the way, how's the recruitment today? How many good seedlings are there? Beta Persei didn't dwell on the issue of public security. Instead, he asked about the recruitment of the publicity department. Shuiqing knew that this was probably the sixth young master's intention. He wanted to find out more about them. So she answered truthfully, the situation isn't too good. Although there are quite a lot of people here, most of them aren't in good condition, especially their skin. Perhaps it's because of the climate and environment. Most of them are too rough and dark. I'm not discriminating against them. But since they're performing for everyone, they should at least look pleasing to the eyes. It's better to avoid those who don't look interesting at first glance. After saying this, Shui Qing made a gesture of touching her forehead. Well, after being busy for more than an hour, we only found 3 good seedlings. After saying this, she handed a roster to Beta Persei. Due to their relationship with Yang Qindong, the people of Yangxia were more used to using hours instead of hours when talking about time. However, they only found 3 suitable people in more than an hour. This was indeed a lot of pressure for the publicity department that had to recruit 200 students. Beta Persei pretended not to care and took a look at the roster. The name of the last of the 3 recruited people, Kikij, came into his eyes. Chichiga, that's a nice name. He still asked, as if he didn't know anything about it. It had to be said that after being by Yang Qindong's side for a long time, Yang Er had learned to do things in a roundabout way. He had also learned some methods. If it was in the past, he might have directly asked questions. Yes. Speaking of Kikij, Shui Qing seemed to be very interested. I don't know how this girl takes care of herself. Her skin is good, and she has a good dancing foundation. She's a talent that our publicity department urgently needs. You haven't seen her, but even if she wore the most simple clothes, you can still see that she's a delicate flower. Shui Qing said unintentionally, or rather, she said it as if she was showing off. When Tiger's mane heard everything, he was even more certain that the girl he saw should be Kikij. This was because when he entered the big house, he observed that there were many girls who came, and they were all dressed in colorful clothes. He thought that on such an occasion, they would wear the most beautiful clothes and leave the best first impression for others. Kikij did not wear any colorful clothes. Perhaps it was because of her personality, or perhaps that was the best she had. Unfortunately, Kikij was too happy. After knowing that she was chosen, she left in a hurry and did not even leave an address. This made Beta Persei unable to find out more even if he wanted to. Of course, with his identity, it was not impossible for him to find someone in the beginning city based on his name. However, that would be too much of a waste of manpower and material resources. Beta Persei did not want to be special. He thought that since this girl would come to work in the publicity department, as long as he had the heart, would he be afraid that he would not have the opportunity to see her? Beta Persei was still thinking about the next opportunity to meet Kikij when Kikij returned home in high spirits. However, as soon as she entered the room, she saw her brother, Ba Tu, squatting on the ground, and her mother, Fatima, comforting him. Ba Tu, don't think too much. The mercenaries are doing this for your own good. Who asked you to have no brothers in the family? This is also for our family's sake, Fatima said earnestly and reached out to stroke Batu's hair. She was undoubtedly a loving mother. What's going on? Kikij, who had a premonition, looked at her mother and brother and asked as she walked forward. Sister, they don't want me. They said that I'm the only son in the family. When Batu heard his sister's voice, he quickly raised his head. When he looked at Kikij, his eyes were full of grievances. If Batu's performance was not good enough and his physical fitness was not strong enough, it might still be sad, but it was also difficult for Batu to accept. However, he passed the basic physical fitness assessment and even got a good result in his equestrian performance. However, when they finally investigated his family situation and learned that he was the only son, they directly rejected him. According to the mercenary examiner, it was too dangerous for the only son to go to the battlefield. They could not use the future of a family as an excuse. Logically speaking, these words were really for the sake of these Mongolian youths. The mercenaries didn't want to end the bloodline of these youths. After all, anything could happen on the battlefield, and the enemy wouldn't take extra care of you just because you were the only child of your clan. However, the situation of Batu's family needed to be changed urgently, especially his mother's illness. He had to find a way to treat it as soon as possible. If he could not join the army, what else could he do? Not to mention that he did not earn much from doing manual labor. It was already early winter. What else could he do? Batu was a filial child. He was anxious to rely on his own efforts to change his family. In his opinion, this was what an indomitable man should do. Kikich was also shocked by this statement. Her brother woke up very early today, even earlier than her sister, who had to wake up to make breakfast. His eagerness to join the army was already very obvious. She originally thought that her brother was tall and strong. He would definitely be a good seedling if he joined the army. However, she did not expect that he would be rejected with such a reason. This was really unexpected. How about little brother not join the army? I have already been chosen to join the publicity department. In the future, I will have a salary of 10 taels of silver a month. Our family situation will slowly change. The originally good news, now that it came out of Kikich's mouth, it did not seem that surprising anymore. Ah, sister, have you been chosen? That's great. Batu, who was still squatting on the ground, was pleasantly surprised when he heard the news. However, he quickly lowered his head again. His sister could do things for the family, but he, a 7 feet tall man, could not do anything. This seemed to reflect his incompetence. Hearing that his daughter was chosen by the publicity department, Bak Dama was also very happy. Good. I knew my daughter was the best. There's no problem. In any case, there was still good news. Bak Dama actually said that he wanted to borrow some food from the neighbors to celebrate. Moreover, for the first time, she did not allow Kikich to interfere. In her words, her daughter's hands would be of great use in the future, so it was better not to do these manual labor. His mother went to work alone. Batu was in a bad mood. He returned to his room and covered himself with a blanket to sleep, leaving Kikich alone. However, her feelings were actually very complicated. She really wanted to help her brother. Just like the Han people, the Mongols also had the idea of valuing boys over girls. No matter how good a daughter was, she would eventually have to marry someone. Only when the man in her family had a promising future would he be able to bring real change to the family. The relationship between the two of them had been very good since they were young. As the elder sister, Kikich didn't want to see her younger brother depressed and upset. She would rather not be chosen than to see this scene happen. No, I have to help my brother. A firm voice rang out in his heart. Chichi-gu said that he had something to do and left the room. In her mind, she thought about what Beta Persei had said to her. If you have any problems, you can come to me. She decided to give it a try. No matter what, he was still in the Yang residence. It shouldn't be a problem for him to help her brother with this small matter. Beta Persei did not expect that while he was still thinking about Kikich in his heart, she would actually come to his door so quickly. He was still on duty by Yang Chendong's side. After reporting what he saw at the publicity office, he became a little absent-minded. With Yang Chendong's observation skills, he naturally noticed this, but he did not ask anything. He believed that if there was really something big, Beta Persei would definitely report to him. It was also at this time that the second guard captain, Dao Xiao, entered the room. Seeing the sixth young master sitting there reading a book, he carefully went to Beta Persei's side. Beta Persei, gee, someone is looking for you outside. It's a girl called Kikich. Chapter 7:55. Originally, Yang Er still looked listless. Looking at the situation, he wanted to ask who was looking for him, but when he suddenly heard Chichi-ji's name, he didn't even report to Yang Chendong. Instead, he rushed out of the house and disappeared without a trace. What's going on? Yang Chendong noticed Beta Persei's abnormal behavior. He did not ignore it, but asked Dao Xiao, who seemed to know some inside information. Dao Xiao was not gossiping, but he had to answer the sixth young master's question. He immediately told him what happened in the morning at the entrance of the publicity office. He was very objective. He even reported what Beta Persei said to Shuiqing. Yang Qindong was smart. He immediately knew that Beta Persei had fallen in love with the girl called Kikich. Beta Persei was not young anymore, and Yang Qindong never stopped his subordinates from dating and getting married. There was even a period of time when he wanted to find a wife for Beta Persei. He did not expect that the opportunity would come to him. Since it had happened, he could not ignore it. After all, Beta Persei was someone close to him. If something happened, it would be a big deal. Go find Feng Liang. Tell him that I said it. I want to know more about Kikich, her family, and the people around her. Yang Qindong ordered Dao Xiao. Although it was a coincidence, and there should not be any problems with Kikich, things were unpredictable. Without investigation, there was no right to speak. Beta Persei did not know that Kikich's matter had attracted the sixth young master's attention. He only knew that the girl in his heart had appeared, and that was enough to make him excited. After running out of the room, Beta Persei quickly calmed down. First, he tidied up his clothes and found that there was nothing wrong. Then, he walked out of the Yang mansion's gate with steady steps. The sixth young master had said that the more important the matter was, the calmer one had to be in order to make the most accurate decision. Young heir also learned to calm down, but when he went out and saw Kikich standing there with her head lowered, he was discouraged. He realized that his heartbeat was very disappointing. No matter how hard he tried to calm down, he couldn't calm his heart down. Perhaps Beta Persei was worried that the girl already had a husband. It's you, Kikich, right? My name is Beta Persei. No matter what kind of worries he had, Beta Persei decided to get to know her first. If she was not betrothed, then his chance had come. While introducing himself, he also extended an arm that represented friendship. Unfortunately, he did not get a response from Kikich. The other party was not used to this at all. Seeing Second Yang reach out his hand to her, as soon as they met, she was shocked. Her whole body involuntarily stepped back, and her eyes revealed fear. She almost shouted, "What do you want to do?" He. Seeing that his actions were a little frightening, Beta Persei smiled foolishly and retracted his hand. He touched his head and broke the awkwardness by asking, "You must have something to tell me. Speak." Beta Persei extended his hand as soon as they met, which was not considered polite at the time. It made Kikich feel that she had found the wrong person. After all, that action was a little too frivolous. However, Beta Persei expressed his goodwill and asked if she had anything to tell him. This made Kikich hesitate for a while, before she bit her lip and made up her mind. "Our family has encountered a little problem, and we would like to ask for your help, but I don't know if you can help." Beta Persei was delighted when he heard this. This was a good opportunity to understand Kikich's family. He would know what kind of person she was as soon as he went, so how could he refuse? As for his ability, there should not be many people in the beginning city who would not give him face. Beta Persei was of course full of confidence in the things he was good at. He patted his strong chest and said, "I can still do ordinary things." Beta Persei's appearance seemed to give Kikich confidence. She really had no other choice. It seemed that among the people she knew, only Beta Persei seemed to have some status. "Well, it's about my younger brother. His name is Ba Tu." In the end, Kikich told Beta Persei about the family matters, but it was only limited to her younger brother. She did not tell him about her mother's illness and poor health. It was the first time they met, so it would be rude to tell him everything. Beta Persei listened carefully. At this time, he felt that Kikich's voice was so pleasant to the ear. Even though she was a little pouting when she spoke Chinese and was not even fluent, he felt that it was nice to hear. Perhaps this was what it meant by beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Kikich finished speaking very quickly, but when she saw that Beta Persei was still listening carefully, she could not help but ask anxiously, Are you listening? Oh, I'm listening. Beta Persei quickly returned to his body and nodded. The younger brother you mentioned has good physical fitness. He's already an adult, right? But because he's the only son in the family, he can't join the army, right? Yes, that's it. Do you have any ideas? After listening, Kikich's hopeful eyes fell on Beta Persei. Beta Persei enjoyed this kind of gaze very much, but he also felt a lot of pressure. This was the time to show his ability. If he did not perform well, he was afraid that there would be no chance for what would happen next. With Beta Persei's identity, if he greeted the conscription office, the problem of Batu joining the army would definitely be solved in the most appropriate way, and even the best arrangements would be made. After all, he was one of the people around the sixth young master, so he definitely had some face. However, after following Yang Chendong for a long time, Beta Persei trusted his eyes more than his ears. He decided to take a look at Batu personally to see if he was really as tall and strong as Kikich said. Of course, no one knew if he would take this opportunity to understand Kikich's family situation. How about this? Can I meet your brother? If he's really as good as you said, then I should be able to help. Beta Persei did not immediately make a promise. Instead, he wanted to understand the situation before making a decision. Kikich hesitated. She was not worried about Beta Persei's ability. After all, they were at the entrance of the Yang mansion, where he came from. Would the people around the god of war and the messenger of Tungri be bad people? She was only worried about the situation at home. For some reason, she did not want Beta Persei to see the situation at home. What's wrong? Is there a problem? Seeing that Kikich did not immediately agree, Beta Persei asked. Logically speaking, since he had agreed to help, the other party should be happy and should immediately lead the way. Could it be that there was something that was hard to say? Or was it that she was already married, and if she brought another man home, others would gossip about her? No problem. Kikich bit her lips again and said, then, as if she had made some kind of decision, she said, I'll take you to my house to see my brother. In Kikich's heart, there was nothing more important than her brother's matter. Okay, wait for me. Beta Persei's heart also settled down. Then he chuckled and turned to the sentinel standing guard at the entrance of the Yang mansion and said, Go and call out Ba Daojiang's group of brothers. Also, send someone to tell Captain Dao Xiao that I'm going out to handle some personal matters. As one of Yang Chendong's people, Beta Persei had to inform him wherever he went, even if it was not a matter of freedom. Of course, there was no need to report to Yang Chendong and disturb the sixth young master when he went out to handle some personal matters. However, someone in the mansion had to know. The sentinel was also a soldier of the guards. Seeing that it was Beta Persei who had spoken, he immediately agreed and turned to enter the mansion. Not long after, Ba Daojiang led 5 guards out of the mansion and came to Beta Persei's side. Ba Daojiang is ordered to lead the soldiers to report to Beta Persei. As soon as Ba Daojiang appeared, he saluted and said seriously, this was not Beta Persei putting on airs, but doing things according to the rules set by Yang Chendong. The rules required that no one was allowed to act alone when they went out. There had to be at least 4 to 6 people. This was also for their safety. Although the security in the first city seemed to be very good, this was a new city after all. There were many Mongolians in the city. If they were not careful, wouldn't they be asking for trouble if there were any losses? Ba Daojiang had a total of 6 people behind him. Beta Persei turned to look at Kikich and said in a gentle tone, Okay, you lead the way. Seeing that Second Yang was able to bring 6 soldiers with him, just by saying a few words, and they were all from the Yang residents. Chichigu thought even more highly of Second Yang's ability. He nodded and said, "All right, follow me. However, my home is a bit far from the city. I'm afraid it's a bit far." "It doesn't matter. We don't have any other abilities, but we're not afraid of being tired." "Ha ha." Beta Persei patted his chest and said, "Kikich did not lie. They walked for nearly 2 hours. He did not know how a girl like her walked from her house to the Yang mansion's entrance alone. When Kikich finally stopped in front of an extremely ordinary-looking door, Beta Persei knew that they had finally arrived. He could not help but curse in his heart. It seems that I have to ride here next time. The distance is indeed a little too far. In fact, in the first city, people were not allowed to ride horses on the streets without special reasons. Firstly, it was easy to collide with people on horseback. Secondly, horses had horse dung, which would increase the difficulty of cleaning the clean streets in the city. But riding a bicycle was different. It was clean and fast. Of course, other than Beta Persei and the others, it would not be so easy for ordinary people to get a bicycle. When they finally arrived at the door of Kikich's house, Beta Persei's expression became much more solemn. He even tried to squeeze out more smiles on his face. He wanted to leave a good first impression. Chapter 756. There was no such thing as individual houses in the beginning city. They were all collectively owned, which meant that they all belonged to Yang Chendong. Everyone who came here was just renting a house. According to the rules, only those who had worked in the beginning city for more than 5 years were qualified to buy a house here. This caused the houses here to look the same from the outside. The so-called differences were only the various differences after entering the rooms. For example, the furnishings in the house, the decent items in the house, and so on. However, when Beta Persei followed Kikich into the house, he really did not see anything decent. It gave him a feeling of emptiness. And then cleanliness. Cleanliness did not mean that there was nothing clean, but it meant that the house was wiped clean. From this, it could be seen that this family was very hardworking. When Kikich came back and brought some soldiers with him, Ba Dama and Ba Tu, who were cooking, were frightened. They stood up and stood there cautiously, not knowing what to do. After all, the mercenaries were usually seen patrolling the streets with a meticulous look. Suddenly coming into such close contact with them, it was more or less a little difficult for them to adapt. "Mother, brother, this is Beta Persei. He is from the Yang residence." "Brother Beta Persei, this is my mother, Ba Dama, and my brother, Ba Tuesday." Kikich stood between the two sides and introduced them to each other. "So it's auntie and brother. Hello, my name is Beta Persei." Beta Persei was very enthusiastic and generous, but this time he did not reach out his hand, afraid that he would leave a bad impression on the other party. When she heard from her daughter that the person was from the Yang residence, the expression on Ba Dama's face immediately became very nervous. "So it's a soldier from the Yang residence. Please take a seat in the house." Seeing Ba Dama's nervousness, Beta Persei chuckled again and said, "Annie, you can call me Beta Persei. You don't have to call me soldier." As he spoke, Beta Persei had already stepped into the house and saw a plate of mutton on the table. Although the portion was small, it looked crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. It seemed to be very delicious. This should be Kikich's lunch. Seeing Beta Persei staring at the mutton, Badama said with an unnatural expression, "Kikich was chosen by the publicity team. Our family is preparing to celebrate for her. If you want to try it, you can try it. Batu, why don't you add another knife disc?" "Oh." After Batu agreed, he turned around and walked to the kitchen. However, Beta Persei reached out to stop him. "Is this how you celebrate? There should be something delicious left, right? Bring it all up." Of course, Beta Persei was not craving mutton. In fact, after coming to the grasslands, he had eaten mutton the most. However, eating the same thing every day for a long time would make anyone sick of it. The reason why Beta Persei said this was because he saw that this plate of mutton should be the only dish for Kikij's celebration. When he first entered the house, he smelled some potatoes. If he guessed correctly, there should be potato cubes in the pot, which could be regarded as a staple food in the house. Wanting to see the other dishes in front of everyone put Badama in a difficult position. However, she was older after all, and her skin was thicker. She shook her head and said, "This is the celebratory dish we prepared for Kikij. This is the one I borrowed from the neighbor. When Kikij receives his monthly salary, he will have to return it." Since he had already said everything, there was nothing left to hide. Thus, Badama revealed everything to him. Hearing this, Beta Persei's face did not show any surprise. He just had mixed feelings in his heart. This was the life of the Mongolian people. Those Khans still wanted to fight for territory and fought every day. The lives of the people were so difficult. Who would care? This was also because he had been with Yang Qindong for a long time and learned to be compassionate. However, Beta Persei was not the sixth young master. He quickly returned to reality. First, he glanced at Kikij, then his gaze fell on the door and shouted, "Badeo Jiang, come in." As soon as his voice fell, the door opened. Badeo Jiang, who was dressed in a military uniform, strode in. "Brother Beta Persei, what can I do for you?" "Send someone to the nearest restaurant and get 6 dishes and some good wine. Remember, be quick." Beta Persei's voice carried an unquestionable air of command. "Yes." 8 Dao Jiang Ili saluted and turned to carry out the orders. Kikij's family of 3 looked at him. In the end, Badeo Ma said, "No need, we're used to eating this. It's fine if we eat this normally, but today is a day to celebrate Kikij. How can we just do it casually? Just get 6 dishes to show that everything is going well." Beta Persei looked as if he had made up his mind. Then, he did not dwell on this matter. Instead, his gaze fell on Batu's day. "I heard from your sister that your physical fitness is good, but you weren't selected because you're the only son." Batu was still upset about the fact that he didn't enlist in the army. Suddenly, Yang Er asked him such a question, which made him see hope. He nodded and said, "Yes, I passed the physical fitness test and the equestrian test. My results were good. But when it came to my family, they said that I was the only son in the family and persuaded me to leave." Speaking of this, Batu still had an aggrieved look on his face full of indignation. "Yes." Beta Persei nodded. This was the same as what Kikij said. Seeing Beta Persei nod, Batu was full of hope. He thought that since this person was from the Yang residence and could order other soldiers at will, he should have some status. As long as he was willing to help, there should be no problem. While he was still thinking about this, Beta Persei had already spoken. "The people in the recruitment office are right to do this. This is also the intention of the god of war. After all, people will die in war. He is actually thinking for you." Even Beta Persei said that this was the right thing to do. Batu, who had just seen hope, could not help but lower his head again. Didn't this mean that there was no hope for him to enlist in the army? Just when Batu lowered his head and Kikij and his mother's faces were also gloomy, Beta Persei suddenly spoke again. "There are exceptions. If you really want to rely on enlisting in the army to protect the first city and want to use this to make a name for yourself, this feeling is understandable and can be satisfied. But there is one thing: people may die in war. Are you afraid of death? And, Auntie, if Batu dies gloriously on the battlefield, can you accept it?" Things suddenly took a turn for the better, and Kikij's family of 3 could not help but feel their eyes light up. Next, Batu spoke first. "I can accept it. People will always die in war. If I die in war, it means that my skills are not as good as others. There is nothing to regret. Okay, what do you think, Annie? Young, or couldn't help but ask. Then she turned her gaze towards Badama. As a mother, who would want to see her son get into trouble? Who would be willing to see her son die? However, Badama knew her son's ambition. She thought that people would die eventually, either vigorously or without life. She nodded heavily. Life and death are up to fate. I support my son. Then, there's no problem. Hearing such an answer, Beta Persei said, as if he was making a guarantee. Ah, there's no problem? Kikich, who was at the side, did not understand. What did this mean? Could it mean that Ba, too, could enlist in the army? Not only Kikich, but Ba Dama and Ba, too, also looked at Beta Persei with a puzzled expression. He had to add, how about this? I'll take Ba, too, to the recruitment office in a while. As long as he passes the previous physical fitness and equestrian assessment, then he can enter the barracks in the afternoon. But for the 1 to 3 months of recruit training, I'm afraid you won't be able to meet him. That's a closed training, so you have to be mentally prepared in this regard. It's okay, I can bear it. As if afraid that Beta Persei would go back on his word, Ba too hurriedly shouted. At this time, he could not wait to go to the barracks with Beta Persei immediately. As for whether he would eat or not, it did not matter. There's no hurry. The food will be delivered soon. We'll go after eating. Yang Er chuckled. At this moment, Kikich also laughed. From time to time, her eyes would look at Beta Persei. Her expression was full of a different kind of feeling. Ba Daojung was very fast. After a while, he returned with 6 dishes. 4 of them were meat, 2 were vegetables, and a large pot of white rice. Kikich did not know how long it had been since she had such a sumptuous lunch. With Beta Persei taking the lead, everyone ate until they were full. Then, when Kikich looked at Beta Persei, there was a trace of tenderness in her eyes. Cough, cough, cough. Suddenly, Ba Dama coughed out of the blue. It was followed by a long bout of nonstop coughing until his face turned red. Only then did he slowly recover. What's going on? Auntie has caught a cold. Didn't she go to the hospital in the city? Beta Persei noticed that neither Kikich nor Ba Tu showed any surprise at this moment. It was as if they were used to it. He suddenly felt that something was wrong and asked with concern. Yes, but the cost of the hospital is too high. We can't afford it. Kikich answered, but as she spoke, her voice became softer and softer. How can this be? If you're sick, you have to see a doctor. This can't be delayed. How about this? Send Annie to the hospital immediately. I'll pay for the cost. Beta Persei knew that his opportunity to perform had come again, so he said without hesitation. Chapter 757. How can we do that? We already owe you too much. Kikich's face turned red as she spoke. At that moment, she even thought of selling her body to save her mother. Why not? You and your brother are going to serve the mercenaries soon. You can return the money you earn to me in the future. Besides, you and Ba too are going to join the army, so Auntie will be considered a military family member. She will be taken care of in the hospital, and the fees will be reduced a lot. Don't hesitate. This matter is settled. Beta Persei said in an unquestionable tone. At that moment, he had undoubtedly become a pillar of support for Kikich's family. After the meal, Beta Persei first accompanied Badama's family to the hospital. When Yang Er appeared here, even the director was shocked. Then he found the best doctor. After seeing him, he concluded that it was only caused by the cold. There was nothing wrong with him. He just needed to stay in the hospital and take medicine to recuperate for a while. At that moment, Beta Persei asked for a room to be admitted to the hospital. Naturally, he was given the green light. Under the principle of special treatment, Badama was soon admitted to the hospital. Next, Beta Persei accompanied Ba-Tu to the recruitment office. Since he had shown up, the officers there naturally obeyed. Ba-Tu's name appeared on the recruits' roster, and he was asked to arrange a place to live and receive the corresponding equipment. At this point, he had done what he had promised. Kikich, who had been following beside him, also found that her mother and brother were not around. She was alone with Beta Persei, Ba-Daojiang, and the others naturally kept a certain distance from the two of them. Seeing that there was no one around, Kikich's face turned even redder. Thank you for everything you've done for our family. Hey, it's nothing. Since you think so highly of the mercenaries, it's only right that we do something for you. Beta Persei said casually, but after saying this, his face turned a little red. He seemed to have thought of something, but did not dare to say it out loud. What happened to you? Looking at Beta Persei's awkward appearance, Kikich asked curiously. He did not look as heroic as he did in the hospital and the recruitment office just now. Beta Persei, who was questioned by Kikich, blushed again, but in the end, he gritted his teeth and said, as if he had made up his mind, can I visit you at the publicity office in the future? Kikich didn't expect it to be this question. For a moment, her face turned red like a ripe apple. If she still did not know what Beta Persei was thinking, she would be too stupid. Kikich did not answer. Beta Persei became a little anxious. I just want to see you. I won't disturb your work. I'll just look at you from afar. Okay? Yes. After waiting for a long time, Kikich finally gave a response. Although it was only one word, it carried a lot of signals. It also caused young Heir to be beaming with joy. He was extremely excited. When it was time for dinner, Beta Persei returned to the Yang residence in high spirits, but found that Yang Qindong had not eaten yet and was waiting for him. He hurried over. Young master, it's late. You should have dinner. I'm waiting for you. Let's eat together. Yang Qindong's voice was flat, but when he said that, Beta Persei felt that he had to obey. As Yang Xie continued to expand, although Yang Qindong was only a young man in his 20s, the aura of a superior was very strong. It was no exaggeration to say that he already had the aura of a superior without being angry. Even in the face of the Ming emperor, he would not be afraid. The meal was served. It was only 4 dishes and 1 soup. Beta Persei accompanied Yang Qindong for dinner. After the things were taken away, Yang Qindong looked at Beta Persei. Is there anything you want to say to me? Knowing that nothing could escape the 6th young master's eyes, Beta Persei did not intend to hide anything. He told him everything that happened today from beginning to end. When he finished, he said shyly, Young master, I like Kikich. I want to take her as my concubine. When he said that he wanted to take her as his concubine, Yang Qindong's originally calm expression showed a trace of appreciation. He had previously made a rule that the Cold Blade warriors and above could only marry Han women. No matter how good other women were, they could only be taken as concubines. For Beta Persei to say such words, it was obvious that he was following this rule. After knowing that Beta Persei had a sense of propriety, Yang Qindong had no intention of obstructing him. Instead, he nodded and said, Okay, you can do as you see fit. How about this? Tell me what you've seen and learned from Kikich's family. After knowing that Yang Qindong would not obstruct him and Kikich, Beta Persei also became energetic. He immediately said in detail, Young master, the Mongolian people are too poor. Not only do they not have enough to eat, but they also have no money to treat their illness. There should be many people like this in the beginning city. That's right, the people are too poor. How about this? pass down the order that all military families will have their rent reduced by half. In the future, they will be able to enjoy a 20% discount when buying rice and meat and a 50% discount when treating illnesses. But you have to be careful that only one wife and one concubine of a mercenary warrior can enjoy this treatment. Those who marry several at once can forget about it. Yang Qindong could help others, but the premise was that others approved of him. If anyone who entered the beginning city could receive such treatment, not only would they need a lot of money as subsidies, but it would also be easy for others to take advantage of the loopholes. Being a mercenary was equivalent to facing life and death at any time. Such a sacrifice was worth a certain amount of return. On the contrary, those who just wanted to find a safe place to live and did not want to pay any price could forget about it. He was not a god who could guarantee that everyone would live a good life. Even if he was a savior, he would only save those who needed to be saved and those who worked hard and contributed. Hearing Yang Qindong's actions, Beta Persei solemnly saluted Yang Qindong. This was his gratitude to the sixth young master on behalf of the mercenary families. The next morning, Yang Qindong's new order was spread to the entire city. Instantly, the entire city was in an uproar. Regardless of whether it was those who signed up to join the army or those who wanted to join the publicity department, there were more and more people. After all, as a military family, they had such generous conditions, so it was impossible for them not to join the army even if they wanted to. This kind of spontaneous behavior quickly allowed the publicity department to find 200 good seedlings, filling up the 6,000 slots of the recruitment office. Even so, who knew how many people were still racking their brains to join the ranks of the military? However, rules were rules. In the end, Yu Mian stood up and said that if they wanted to join the army, they would have a chance in the future and would not accept them for the time being. If anyone gathered together and disturbed the order in the city, they would be arrested and disqualified from joining the army in the future. In special times, special methods were needed to govern the city. The beginning city became quiet again and was gradually shrouded by a heavy snow. Just as it seemed calm and many forces on the grassland were hiding for the winter, two pieces of news came from the Security Bureau. The director of the Security Bureau of the beginning city, Feng Liang, appeared in the Yang residence. Sitting in a warm room with a stove wall, Yang Qindong carefully read the two pieces of news and put them aside. "Tell me, how do you feel?" Knowing that the sixth young master was testing him, Feng Liang pondered for a moment, organized his words, and raised his head. "Sixth young master, in this subordinate's opinion, these two matters should have nothing to do with each other. It's good that Ming has developed a new type of cannon, but the results have just come out. However, Zhang Quan and the others have been gone for some time. Judging from the time, they should not have received this news when they set off, so there is no connection, let alone any threat. I can only say that everything is just a coincidence." The two things that Feng Liang reported were that Ming had developed a new type of cannon and that the unit guarding the Datong residence, Zhang Quan, was already 20 miles away and would soon enter the beginning city. Ever since Yang Qindong defeated Yeshen of the Wara with the name of the god of war, Ming's imperial court saw the importance of firearms. They first tried their best to get a Type 81 gun and began to develop an imitation. However, without any guidance, they could only rely on the imitation, and the progress was very slow. At least until now, they had not been able to create it. On the other hand, cannons were different. They knew that only an explosion could cause the greatest lethality after the cannon was fired, so they just had to find a way to do it. Originally, Ming had an artillery battalion, but the cannonballs fired by the artillery battalion were only large iron balls. Wherever they hit, they would leave a hole. The lethality of the cannonballs was too small, and only those standing in the front of the cannonballs would be threatened. However, after all, they had a certain foundation. After understanding the principle and investing a lot of manpower and energy, they finally received news that a new type of cannon had been developed. This news was sent by Yang Guang, who was in charge of the artillery battalion. During the Battle of the Capital, Yang Guang was Yang Qindong's subordinate. Later on, they became friends during the battle. He also listened to Yang Qindong's arrangements and went to the artillery battalion. After more than 3 years, this move finally played its role and news came. The news came, but it was not completely clear what the new cannon looked like. This was also why Yang Qindong was somewhat distressed. It was also at this time that another piece of news came. Bai Ming's Datong guard, eunuch Zhang Quan, was ordered by the emperor to come to Shi City and have a good talk with Yang Qindong. In summary, these two matters seemed to be related. It seemed that Bai Ming had a new type of cannon and had enough confidence, so they decided to have a good talk with this loyal duke. However, only Yang Qindong himself knew that they weren't close to each other. It was just a coincidence. Chapter 758. We still need to send someone to inquire about the new cannon. What exactly is it like? What are its functions and power? We have to find a way to find out. Although it's difficult, we'll try our best to do it. Yang Qindong gave the Security Bureau a direction for the first piece of news. Next, he talked about the second piece of news. When Zhang Quan arrives, arrange for Yu Mian to meet with them and discuss with them. Let's see if there are any regulations to report to me. It was true that Yu Mian was Yu Qian's son, but at that time, Yu Qian had disappeared. Bai Ming did not care about it. As his son, Yu Mian naturally did not need to work for Bai Ming. Based on this point, even Zhang Quan could not say anything. If he insisted on using this matter as an excuse, it could only be said that this person's IQ was too low. Yang Qindong had just made arrangements. That night, 1,000 Bai Ming guards arrived at the foot of the first city. They had already sent someone to report. When Zhang Quan and Captain Su Dei arrived at the foot of the city with the army, the city gate was already wide open. Many soldiers wearing large cotton-padded clothes with torches lined up on both sides of the road. Looking at their appearance, they were all in high spirits. When they looked at the Bai Ming army, their eyes lit up. They were like tigers that could open their bloody mouths at any time and eat people. Zhang Quan was not tall, and his eyes were not big, but they were very spirited. They were like a pair of mouse eyes that kept flickering. It was obvious that this person was still somewhat clever. Captain Su, this is the territory of the Duke of Loyalty. You must instruct your soldiers not to cause trouble. Otherwise, no one can protect you. Looking at the formation at the city gate, Zhang Quan carefully said to Su Dei. At this moment, he was frightened by the situation. His legs were trembling and trembling. A eunuch was a eunuch after all. He relied on pleasing the emperor to obtain power. He had never been through the battlefield. How could he not be afraid in the face of the murderous aura of the mercenaries? This is the original Alakumaki. I only heard that it was pitifully small, but it doesn't look like it. Zhang Quan was extremely flustered. Firstly, the appearance of the mercenaries had frightened him. Secondly, he was shocked by the majestic city in front of him. At this moment, Su Dei was looking at the mercenaries standing outside the city. As a Qianhu, especially a Qianhu at the forefront of the front line, he was more professional than ordinary soldiers. Because of this, he could feel the valiant and murderous aura of the mercenaries. Hearing Zhang Quan's words, Su Dei nodded and said, "This place used to be pitifully small and abandoned for a long time. It seems like the loyal duke really put in a lot of effort here." Su Dei was different from other people. He started off as a corporal and worked his way up bit by bit. In the past, he had been to some places around the Great Ming dynasty. Later, he was chosen by Commander Sun Hong and was promoted step by step to the position of Qianhu guard. It was precisely because he had been to Erakamaki before that he was even more surprised than Zhang Quan when he suddenly saw the magnificent first city. If it weren't for the fact that the aura of these mercenaries was even more amazing, his attention would have been diverted to the city's buildings. The city gate opened, and there were still mercenaries walking out. After about half a cup of tea's time, when everything in sight was lit up by torches, a general wearing a black cloak rode out and stopped 3 meters in front of Zhang Quan and Su Dei. The war horse was stopped by the reins, but the general didn't get off the horse, nor did he report his name. He just stared at Zhang Quan and Su Dei with a scrutinizing gaze. After a long time, he slowly spat out 3 words, "Enter the city." Suddenly being stared at, Zhang Quan felt a chill run down his spine. Even Su Dei, who was at the side, was tense all the time. He just had a feeling that if something really happened, even if he drew his sword, he wouldn't be the other party's opponent. The person who came could give him a great sense of oppression. After saying these 3 words, the general in the black cloak turned and left. He didn't even look at Zhang Quan and Su Dei. It was as if the other party was an insignificant character who didn't deserve his attention at all. With someone leading the way, although he didn't appear to be a very good friend, Zhang Quan and Su Dei had nowhere to go. At this time, they could only follow the other party's footsteps and walk into the first city. The city was also dark. After all, it was late. Under the guidance of the general in the black cloak, they turned left and right and came to the front of an inn. There were already people waiting here to arrange their food, clothing, and accommodation. The area of the inn was not small, and each room was also very big. However, there were more than 1,000 Ming soldiers. When these people swarmed in, it was still a little crowded. However, from the beginning to the end, no one stood out to say anything strange. It was probably because they also knew that this was not their territory, and talking nonsense was likely to bring about an unexpected disaster. These more than 1,000 people stayed in the designated inn until they went to bed. No one came to see them or sent anyone with status to receive them. Only the waiters in the inn were busy. They were just a few waiters. What could they find out from their mouths? At this time, Zhang Quan couldn't help but feel a little regretful. He didn't expect the people here in the first city to be so strong. It seemed that this trip to seek cooperation wouldn't be too smooth. If he had known this, he might not have chosen to come. Yang Qindong naturally couldn't guess what Zhang Quan was thinking. He heard Tiger's Mane report all kinds of things about Zhang Quan and the others in the Yang residence. He couldn't help but smile. Who arranged for Yi La to go out of the city to welcome them? It seemed that the general in the black cloak was the commander of the Nuzan cavalry regiment. Yi La, no wonder the murderous aura, was so strong that even Su Dei was scared. Young master, this is the joint idea of city Lord Yumian and I. We thought that the other party would come from afar, so we have to show them our strength first. Not understanding Yang Qindong's meaning, Tiger's Mane said tentatively. The 6th young master had previously said that he and Yu Mian would be in charge of the welcoming, but he hadn't expressed any attitude. Therefore, sending Yi La was also the idea of the 2 of them in order to intimidate the opponent. If they didn't strike the opponent's morale, they were afraid that some things wouldn't be easy to do next. Well, Yi La's murderous aura is strong. It should scare them so much that they won't be able to sleep well tonight. Yang Qindong still had a smile on his face. Obviously, he wasn't angry about Tiger's Mane and Yu Mian's choice. But in the end, he still said, "I'm afraid that just being a deterrent is not enough. How about this? Let them see the prosperity of the city tomorrow. One by one is the way of civil and martial arts." Finally, there was a clear instruction. Tiger's mane nodded repeatedly and said, "Yes, young master. I'll make the arrangements now." That night, whether it was Zhang Quan or Su Dei, they didn't sleep well. Looking at the situation in the beginning city, they really couldn't guarantee that their heads wouldn't be cut off when they fell asleep. As it turned out, this worry was unnecessary. The next morning, they opened their eyes without any problems. At this time, the inn was extremely lively. The food had already been prepared and served in front of them. There were 4 dishes and 1 soup, and it was a standard that was sufficient. Not only did Zhang Quan and Su Dei, but even the Ming soldiers below exclaim in surprise. "What time is this? Where is this place?" It was cold outside, and this was an isolated city. It should be extremely difficult to transport supplies here. However, the food was still so good. Not only were there meat dishes like mutton and pork, but there were also vegetarian dishes like chives, spinach, and celery. The green color on the plate was shocking. Behind the Datong prefecture was the land of Ming. However, even in such a place, vegetables could only be seen for a few months in a year. In this season, most of the vegetables were potatoes, radishes, and cabbage. How could they eat such green food? This can't be the standard of food every day, right? Looking at the dishes on the table, Zhang Quan was surprised. Su Dei was also shocked by the reality in front of him. A voice sounded in his mind. "This standard of food can't be continued. It's probably because I've just arrived, and they're treating me well. Yes, that must be it." This breakfast was no less than the one that greeted them last night. It gave Zhang Quan, Su Dei, and the others a shock. Not long after breakfast, someone came to deliver a message saying that City Lord Yu Mian was dealing with government affairs and did not have time to see them. He asked Zhang Quan and the others to walk around the city. But at the same time, he also made a request, and that was to not invite too many people on this trip, let alone gather together. Otherwise, if something went wrong, both sides would lose face. After sending away the messenger, Zhang Quan muttered to himself for a moment before looking at Su Dei and saying, "Thousand Commander Su, since they're letting us look around without any defenses, we'll do as they wish. Let's arrange for the soldiers below to be led by a sergeant to walk around the city. At night, they'll report to us what they see. Remember to remind them not to make trouble out of nothing. Otherwise, no one can protect them." When he said the last sentence, Zhang Quan's expression was much more serious. When Su Dei heard this, he nodded and went to make arrangements. Hundreds of small groups, led by the Ming army squad leaders, left the inn and started to move through the city according to the directions they had divided. Zhang Quan and Su Dei didn't stay idle either. They also brought a few attendants to the main street of the first city. They went to the commercial street that the innkeeper had mentioned. The commercial street was something that Yang Chendong must build in every city that belonged to him. By gathering all the businesses in one place, not only could it be better managed, but it could also attract people's attention. Whether it was merchants or ordinary people, they could buy things better. Chapter 759, based on agriculture, industry, commerce, and light industry. This was the way Yang Chendong chose to develop the economy. Vast land and abundant resources were naturally a characteristic of the Central Plains. However, don't forget that there was a large population behind it. If one wanted to support so many people, just collecting taxes from the land would not solve the fundamental problem. On the contrary, it would increase the burden of the people. Therefore, from the beginning, Yang Chendong only collected a small amount of land tax symbolically. Instead, he focused on commercial development. Merchants were engaged in trade. They played the game of buying at a low price and selling at a high price. Relatively speaking, they were considered as mental workers. Such people not only contributed less, but they also earned more. Compared to the farmers who faced the yellow soil with their backs facing the sky, the investment and harvest of both sides were completely not proportional. This ratio may not be seen in a short period of time. However, as time passed, the contradictions would inevitably begin to deepen. Once the gap between the rich and the poor was widened, all kinds of problems would emerge one after another. Facts also proved that when every dynasty was first established, the social order was very good. However, as it continued to develop, there were more and more unfair things. In the end, society became more and more chaotic until one day, when it could no longer be suppressed, it was replaced by a new dynasty. In order to avoid income inequality and too big of a gap, Yang Qindong adopted a heavy tax on businesses and a small land tax on farmers. Although this could not completely avoid the existence of the gap, at least it was controlled to a relatively acceptable level. Only by walking on two legs could society develop normally and continuously improve. Naturally, while imposing heavy taxes, Yang Qindong also gave a certain amount of respect to businesses. Just like in terms of social status, they were constantly being raised. This was contrary to the national policy of the Great Ming Dynasty. In the Great Ming Dynasty, the status of merchants was so low that it was even lower than the ordinary people. In the eyes of others, they were people who reaped without sowing. They were unscrupulous people who talked about money and were disgraced by others. However, in the territory controlled by Yangxia, merchants were quite respected because they paid a heavy tax to society. This was equivalent to making a great contribution. With the rise in status, more and more businessmen were willing to come to Yangxia's territory to develop their businesses. As a matter of fact, they earned quite a bit. After all, the goods produced by Crimson City were so novel, high quality, and few in number. It could be said that the demand exceeded the supply. It could be said that in the environment at that time, as long as one had the means to obtain the goods produced in Crimson City, one would not have to worry about selling them. The only difference was how high the price of the goods could be. If it had to be summed up in 8 words, it would be that there was no highest, only higher. Business was so profitable that it had become an important cornerstone of Yangxia's development. Even so, how could Yang Qindong let go of such a good opportunity so easily? At the beginning of the construction of the first city, he had planned out a commercial street. He waited for the cement and steel bars to arrive from the Crimson City by sea to begin construction. Then, a large number of goods began to fill this street, causing it to quickly become prosperous and lively. This was exactly what Zhang Quan and Su Dei saw. They were surprised to find that even though it was snowing heavily outside, it was still very cold. But in the commercial street, it was indeed a bustling scene. People were squeezing and huddling together. From afar, it was as bustling as the center of the capital. If there had to be a difference, it would be that the clothes of the people here were very different from those in the capital of Beiming. Here, they could see merchants wearing all kinds of strange clothes. Most of them were Mongolian merchants, and there might be merchants from further regions and countries. But what surprised Zhang Quan was that he also saw merchants from the Great Ming Dynasty here. Why would merchants from the Great Ming Dynasty appear in the grassland? Could it be that they had secretly joined the Mongolian tribe? With such doubts, Zhang Quan personally walked up to a merchant who was wearing the same clothes as the people of the Great Ming Dynasty. They seemed to be chatting, but at the same time, they seemed to be asking something. The merchant did not know Zhang Quan's true identity. He only felt that this person gave him a feminine feeling. But the other party spoke the language of the Great Ming Dynasty, and this could not be fake. Moreover, the other party's clothes were the same as his. Since they were both from the Great Ming Dynasty, the merchant had a natural sense of closeness. Under Zhang Quan's intention, The two sides quickly chatted, and the conversation was very congenial. After nearly half an hour, Zhang Quan returned to Su Dei's side, but his expression was somewhat ugly. "Eunuch Zhang, what's going on? Why is there a merchant from the great Ming dynasty here?" Su Dei had been curious for a long time, and finally had the opportunity to ask. "He is indeed a merchant from the great Ming dynasty, and he is from our Ming." Zhang Quan's status was naturally higher than Su Dei's, but considering that he still needed the other party to ensure his safety this time, he did not hide anything. He did not join the Mongolian tribe, nor did he join the Duke of Zhongdan. He is buying goods here because he wants to sell them back to our Ming. Buying goods from the grassland and selling them back to Ming? This can take more than 20 days. Hearing this answer, Su Dei was also shocked and said with a puzzled expression, "But our Ming no longer has any goods. Or rather, we have goods, but they are controlled by those aristocratic families and important ministers in the imperial court. Small merchants like this have no share at all." They also heard about what happened in the beginning city, and they also heard that as long as they have money, they can get the goods here. Moreover, as real Han people, they can get a 5% discount when they get the goods. Driven by benefits, they will come even if they are far away. Zhang Quan said this expressionlessly, but in fact, his heart was bleeding. Speaking of which, Zhang Quan was able to become the eunuch guarding the Datong prefecture. And he also had a backer in the palace. Even his name was in the heart of the Daizongzhu Qiyu, and he could be considered to be in the privileged class. However, he was also in the privileged class, and he still had to be divided into factions. He was very pessimistic about some of the influential people in the capital. Some people only relied on the power in their hands to do some things that took advantage of others. Once there was a problem, they might not have the ability to solve the problem. Even so, these people who did not have much ability and only knew how to play tricks had a prosperous career. Some of them even received the favor of the emperor, which made Zhang Quan even more furious. With this understanding, and now hearing this merchant's words, it was no wonder that his expression became very bad. Zhang Quan saw something deeper, which was the decay and decline of the great Ming dynasty. Although it was a small matter, it did give him a different feeling. Here, all he saw was prosperity, youthfulness, and hope. Su Dei was only a Qianhu. Perhaps he could not think of so many things, but he also knew that in the long run, the influence of the beginning city would grow bigger and bigger. One day, it would have the power to replace the great Ming dynasty. While the two of them were still lamenting in their hearts, a mercenary soldier in military green suddenly came. "My lords, our city lord invites you." Was he finally going to see the city lord? Zhang Quan nodded to Su Dei and then said, "Please lead the way." This journey was very far, and they were 5 miles away from the city. Fortunately, horses had been prepared here, and the road had been completely cleared to ensure that they could travel unimpeded. Even so, after driving for nearly half an hour, they arrived at their destination. They came to a vegetable greenhouse area covered with plastic films. The soldier who led the way took out a special token that emitted a silver light from his body. No one stopped them all the way. When they finally arrived in front of a large shed area, he got off his horse, pointed to a large shed area, and said, "My lords, our city lord is inside. Please." Zhang Quan and Su Dei got off their horses and did not bring any entourage. In fact, not everyone could enter this shed. The two of them followed the soldier into the shed, and the first feeling they had was warmth, compared to the cold weather outside. Not only was the air here fresher, but the climate was also very pleasant, giving people the feeling that the 4 seasons were like spring. What greeted their eyes was not a white expanse, but was completely replaced by green. At this moment, Yu Mian, who was in front of a cucumber rack, turned his head with a smile on his face. He greeted them warmly. Eunuch Zhang, Qinhusu, you're here. Before they came, they knew that the city lord of the beginning city was called Yu Mian. He was the eldest son of Yu Qian, the assistant minister of the Ministry of War. For this matter, the embroidered uniform guards and the East faction guards had also made a report to the imperial court. The general idea was that they suspected that Yu Qian's disappearance had a lot to do with the mercenaries. However, everything was just a guess. Without any evidence, this matter was still unknown in the end. Now that he finally saw Yu Mian, the first thing Zhang Quan said was, "How is City Lord Yu? But I wonder if Assistant Minister Yu is doing well?" In the face of this obvious test, Yu Mian chuckled and replied politely, "My father is doing well. Thank you for your concern, Eunuch Zhang." "Oh, right, it's your first time here. How do you feel about our shed area?" He did not say much about Yu Qian's matter. This was also the result of Yu Mian asking Yang Qindong for advice. He knew that since Ming had sent people here this time, they would definitely be interested in his identity. Naturally, they would not be able to avoid his father. When he asked about Yang Qindong, the answer he received was half hidden, half revealed. After fully understanding this sentence, Yu Mian knew that even if he wanted to say that his father was still alive, he could not tell them what he had done. Thus, he came up with this answer. Yu Mian took the initiative to change the topic, and Zhang Quan sighed in his heart. He knew that this question would end here. Not to mention whether it would cause trouble for him. If he asked, he was afraid that the other party would not answer him even if he asked. Chapter 760. Fortunately, Zhang Quan was a smart person. He knew what could be said more, and what could not be said at all. Therefore, he went along with the flow and said that the greenhouse was very good. It was really a cheerful thing to be able to see these fresh vegetables in the cold winter. After a round of praises, Zhang Quan asked casually, "City Lord Yu, may I know how much space these greenhouses will take up?" "Not much, only 2,000 mu." Yu Mian stroked his beard that had not grown long ago and sighed. To be honest, 2,000 mu was not considered small. This was even because of Yang Qindong's suggestion. When he first heard that they were going to grow vegetables in winter, Yu Mian only thought of 100 mu. That way, even if there were any accidents, there would not be any problems. In the end, it was Yang Qindong who spoke. Considering that the shed tubes and plastic films transported from Qian City could only make 2,000 mu, he decided on this number. Now, it seemed that they had planted too little. If they had known that there would be such a good result, they would not have found it too much even if they doubled it. Just like now, these vegetables had matured. Whether it was transported to the military camp or sold in the market, they were all very popular items. The high price had already allowed them to recover their initial investment. If they sold all of them, just this alone would bring a lot of benefits and income to the first city, especially when Yang Qindong made a move again and came up with such a good thing like a vacuum bag. Once the vegetables were placed in it, it could guarantee that the quality of the vegetables would not be damaged for a certain period of time. This could allow them to be transported to further places. Of course, after being equipped with a vacuum bag, the price of the vegetables was not ordinary. Often, only the leaders of some nearby Mongolian tribes could afford to eat them. However, at that time, this was already considered a miracle. After all, although the vacuum bag was not valuable, it was indeed something that no one else could produce except for the factories in Qian City. When Zhang Quan heard that one of them was 2,000 mu, he could not help but sigh. The Duke of Loyal and Bold is really generous. Haha, come on. Since we're here, I'll show you around. Then, you'll personally pick the ripe vegetables. We'll choose to have lunch here. Yu Mian seemed to be in a good mood and greeted them warmly. Zhang Quan and Su Dei each had a basket of vegetables in their hands. Although the two of them didn't have high positions, they hadn't personally picked vegetables for a long time. It was a fresh experience for them, and the greenhouse was filled with cheers and laughter. At noon, the vegetables they picked were placed on the table. With the chef's help, some pork was added. In the end, the three of them ate until they were full. During the meal, the guests and the host enjoyed themselves to the fullest, but after the meal, the atmosphere quickly cooled down because they all knew that it was time for negotiation, and it was time for them to state their conditions. There was a war of words going on in the tent area. In the Yang mansion in the beginning city, Yang Qindong was standing in front of the sand table and looking at it carefully. He had been standing here since lunch, and it had been nearly an hour since he finished his lunch. What is the sixth young master doing? Xiu Vi, the captain of the first guard on duty, finally couldn't help but ask when he saw Yang Qindong standing there for a long time without moving, to become a member of the guard. Loyalty was essential, not to mention physical fitness, but the most important thing was that they had to keep their mouths shut, often by the sixth young master's side. It was inevitable that they would come into contact with some confidential matters. They had to know what could be said and what could not be said. Even the ordinary members knew about this, not to mention Cho Wu, who was the captain. However, he still asked. It was probably because there was only young air in front of him. Moreover, he was indeed curious about this matter. I don't know. Beta Persei shook his head. Obviously, he couldn't see what the young master was doing. However, his intuition told him that the young master must have thought of something again. Perhaps something big would happen soon. Beta Persei was indeed someone who had been by Yang Qindong's side for many years. This time, he guessed correctly. After some time, Yang Qindong finally moved his body and said to Beta Persei, "Go and call Su Yunsheng over." Su Yunsheng, the commander of the reconnaissance battalion. Although his rank was not very high, he was someone whom Yang Qindong trusted very much. After being found by the guards, he immediately rushed to the Yang mansion and came to the hall. "Take a good look at this place. I want to know the details of his situation. Go and do it." Yang Qindong pointed to a place called Tala City on the sand table and ordered Su Yunsheng. Su Yunsheng left. Since it was an order from the sixth young master, he naturally didn't dare to be careless. He immediately sent the most elite force of the reconnaissance battalion to investigate Talu City. Not long after he left the Yang mansion, City Lord Yu Mian rushed over to report on his work. "Sixth young master, we had a preliminary meeting, but the results weren't very satisfactory." "Well, since it's a negotiation, naturally there won't be a result so soon. It's just that we can't wait any longer. How about this? Go and find them again tomorrow, and tell them that we'll only give them 3 days. If they can't reach an agreement, then they can go back to where they came from." Yang Qindong spoke as if he had seen through everything. 3 days. Hearing this answer, Yu Mian was stunned. This time requirement was a bit too tight. Of course, he was more worried that with only 3 days, it would be difficult to reach an agreement. Yang Qindong seemed to see through his worries and chuckled. "Don't worry, go and talk. They should have a change tonight." In the inn, it was already dark. All the Ming soldiers began to return to their teams. Then, all kinds of reports were continuously reported. The Ming soldiers were not like the Cold Front warriors. All of them were capable in both civil and military matters. Many of them were illiterate. The so-called reports were mostly verbal reports. Zhang Quan and Su Dei listened to them talk about what they had seen in the city in the largest room in the inn. However, after only meeting a dozen Dakarches, Zhang Quan waved his hand in annoyance. "All right, tell them that there's no need to report anymore. I think they've seen the same thing." Zhang Quan was annoyed because all the Ming soldiers who came to report were talking about the benefits of the beginning city. For example, the prosperity of this place. For example, the treatment of the soldiers here was good, the food was good, and the equipment was complete. For example, the people here were full of vitality. The people here didn't scold the army and only praised them. According to what these soldiers said, the beginning city was close to becoming a perfect city. Those who could live in this city, whether it was the soldiers or the people, were the happiest people in the world. In that case, what was the Datong mansion? What was the Ming mansion? What was the Ming capital? It was no wonder that Zhang Quan was so angry that he sent all of them away. Although he had long seen that the beginning city was extraordinary, now that everyone said this, it was still a little beyond his expectations. He was even wondering if it was right to let them out during the day. If this continued, the morale of the army would be affected. Eunuch Zhang, I think it's better to let them stay in the inn tomorrow. Su Dei also saw the hidden danger and carefully reminded him. I think it's okay. Zhang Quan glanced at Su Dei. He knew that the other party had the same worries and concerns as him, so he nodded. If this went on, he was really worried that the soldiers he brought would fall in love with this place and become deserters. If that happened, it would really be a huge loss of face. At this moment, Zhang Quan finally knew why the mercenaries allowed him to bring all the soldiers into the city instead of arranging a residence for them outside the city. As a result, no one stopped these soldiers from watching the show in the city. He thought about how he whimsically released all the soldiers in order to find out where the loopholes in the city were. He even had the opportunity to let them come into contact with the mercenaries and see if he could persuade them to work for him. But now, his soldiers had almost rebelled. Now that he thought about it, he had really shot himself in the foot. The beginning city had this kind of attraction. The more you knew, the easier it was to be roped in by them. In view of this, Zhang Quan and Su Dei came to the same conclusion. Tomorrow, they would imprison the soldiers and not allow them to walk on the streets freely. Early the next morning, the order was issued and immediately caused many soldiers to be unhappy. Many of them had heard yesterday that the mercenaries' publicity team would have a program today, and it was said that it would be very interesting. This was very tempting for the Ming soldiers who had been guarding the border. Among them, Nie Xingyi was the one who shouted the loudest. Nie Xingyi was 25 years old. He was only 3 years older than Yang Qindong, but he was already a centurion. Like many soldiers guarding the border, Nie Xingyi was born in a military family. This meant that he was destined to only be a soldier in his life. He had no other choice. Fortunately, although he was born in the same family, he seemed to like to join the army. He was the king of children since he was young. When he grew up, he also had a burly figure. After joining the army, he did not make it in time for the Battle of Tumu Fort. However, when Yeshen led the Walla soldiers into the Hatao area and even wanted to invade Datong, he did participate in the battle. In that battle, he killed 4 enemies and captured 1 alive. He was forcefully promoted from the position of a squad leader to a centurion. It was precisely because of his military exploits that he had obtained everything he had, that he was highly respected among the soldiers. At least in the centurion he led, everyone was willing to listen to him. Yesterday, he also heard from the people in the city that the publicity team would perform a program tomorrow. He also heard from the people that the actors in the publicity team were all young and beautiful. They had good figures, and the performance was also very good. As the saying went, which young girl did not yearn for love, and which man did not fall in love with women? Chapter 761. After all, Nie Xingyi was a young man of 25 years old. He was quite handsome, especially his head. Girls would often blush when they saw his body. However, he was still single. Speaking of which, the border army at that time wasn't that poor. In addition, the imperial court also had to consider the continuation of the army's household. For this reason, they were very concerned about the marriage of the soldiers. When a young lad reached that age, as long as he wanted to, he still had the ability to marry a woman. Nya Xingyi could only blame himself for being too good. He had always wanted to find a good-looking, kind-hearted, and good lady. There were ladies in the Datong prefecture, but young and beautiful ones were rare. Even if there were, they might not be interested in Nya Xingyi's family background and background. As time passed, the days passed. When he was 25 years old, he was still unmarried. How could he not be moved when he found out that there was going to be a performance by such a young man? However, the fact that he could become a centurion proved that he wasn't an ordinary soldier. He was a scheming person. When he heard Zhang Quan and Su Dei announce that they weren't allowed to leave the inn today, he didn't react strongly. Instead, he remained silent, giving people the impression that he was very supportive of this decision. You guys be careful. Watch those who are jumping around. I will deal with them when I return tonight. After receiving news from the city lord's mansion that the peace talks would continue today, Su Dei instructed his centurions before leaving the inn. Nya Xingyi was one of them. The centurions naturally nodded in response to the Kiliarcha's orders. After the two of them left, most of the centurions returned to their rooms to sleep. Only 2 centurions were left on duty. Coincidentally, Nya Xingyi was one of them. Nya Xingyi's heart felt like it was on fire. He didn't know why, but he wanted to see what the performance was all about. With this thought in mind, he began to rack his brain, wondering if he should find an opportunity to take a short break. However, when his gaze fell on the entrance of the inn, he realized that there was a squad leader leading a group of 10 people guarding the entrance. He immediately dismissed the idea of forcing his way out. It wasn't that Nya Xingyi didn't have the courage to fight 1 against 10. On the contrary, these ordinary Biming soldiers were nothing in his eyes. However, he had to consider that once he made a move, he would immediately alert the other centurions. If that happened, no matter how powerful he was, he would not be a match for dozens of centurions. If it were someone else, they might have given up on such an idea. Nya Xingyi was different. Ever since he was a child, he had always been a righteous person. Once he decided on something, he would definitely do it. In the end, he came up with an idea. I can't rush out alone, but what if there are many people? If everyone rushed out together, no one would be able to stop them. The most important thing was that once everyone rushed out, even if Su Dei knew about it later, he wouldn't blame himself. After all, the law couldn't punish the masses. With an idea in mind, Nya Xingyi went to the room of the soldiers who were shouting the loudest with the excuse of patrolling. After that, he gave a speech of generosity. The gist of it was that if they didn't grab hold of some things now, they might not have any hope in their entire lives. Since that was the case, they had to do it even if they had to be scolded behind their backs. Everyone originally had this idea. Now that Nya Xingyi brought it up, they were all overjoyed. After that, he went to the centurion under his control and had a heart-to-heart talk with the soldiers below. After an hour, a small riot began. Caught off guard, the guards who were just putting on a show were pushed to the ground. In an instant, about 300 people walked out of the inn. These people were relatively more courageous or had made up their minds to watch the show. In any case, Nya Xingyi had said that the law couldn't punish the masses. When 30% of the people suddenly ran out, the other centurions were frightened. They hurriedly rushed to the city lord's residence to report to Zhang Quan and Su Dei. In the city lord's residence, Yu Mian had already expressed Yang Qindong's intentions. The negotiations would only last for 3 days. If there were no results, then the people from Baiming would have to leave. Zhang Quan and Su Dei had nothing to say about Yu Mian's domineering aura. This time, they had taken the initiative to rush over to negotiate. Strictly speaking, they were seeking benefits. Now that they were not welcomed, how could they be angry? Since ancient times, it had always been the strong who had the right to speak. With only 3 days left, Zhang Quan did not dare to be careless. He seized every moment to negotiate with Yu Mian. He had already expressed his intention to give in. He had forgotten that just yesterday he had proposed to allow Baiming's army to be stationed in the first city. He had the intention of requisitioning this place and making it the front line of Baiming. This request was also discussed by Zhang Quan and Sun Hong before they came. It was also the best goal that they hoped to achieve. However, it was a pity that Yu Mian directly rejected it. He only replied with 3 words, impossible. Yu Mian did not show the slightest sign of weakness. On the contrary, he became the dominant party. He said that the mercenaries occupied the first city and had already dealt a heavy blow to the Tatar forces, the Agadorji tribe, and the Mabe Mongolian tribe. Based on this, Baiming should pay them. It did not matter how much the military pay was. Yang Qindong wanted to disgust the other party. Besides, if Baiming gave the first city 1 tael of silver, then the army would have 1 tael of silver less. This was a matter of decreasing one's losses and increasing one's gains. No matter how much they did, it would never be too much. Zhang Quan naturally expressed a clear rejection of Yu Mian's request. In his words, most of the money from Baiming's imperial court was used to develop firearms and train the new army. Even the Datong city's military pay could not be truthfully spent. How could there be any money left to give to the first city? All in all, the first negotiation between the 2 sides was like a lion opening its mouth. At the same time, it was also testing the other party's bottom line. Relatively speaking, today's negotiation was much more pragmatic. Especially after knowing that the negotiation time was only 3 days, Zhang Quan put down his arrogance. He did not mention those impossible requests to stimulate the 2 sides. Instead, he put forward some practical requests and conditions for the 2 sides to be allies. The negotiation began to enter the normal track. When the attitude of both sides began to become gentle, suddenly, a soldier outside the door reported that 2 centurions from the Baiming army had come. They said that they had important matters to discuss with Zhang Quan and Su Dei. The negotiation had to be terminated because of this. Yang Mansion. The 4-man post at the door became an 8-man post. At the same time, the number of patrolling soldiers on the streets of the first city began to increase. Even the divisions and regiments that were training in the ice and snow outside the city also gathered and returned to the city. All kinds of signs indicated that something big must have happened in the city. Yang Qindong was in the warm study room. Beta Persei, who was standing beside him, was reporting the situation to him. Young master, I heard that 300 people escaped from the Baiming army. They suddenly disappeared. As soon as he received the news, Lord Yu increased the speed and strength of the patrols in the city. Our Yang Mansion has also made sufficient preparations. The troops that were training outside the city are also returning to the city. Director Feng of the Security Bureau is dispatching people to secretly search for them. After reporting all the information he knew in one breath, Beta Persei took a breath and then waited for Yang Qindong's instructions. 300 people escaped. What's going on? Yang Qindong's expression became serious at this moment. If this was Baiming's plan, these 300 people were likely to cause chaos in the city. Of course, it was only 300 people. In a city with a population of more than 50,000 people and an army of more than 30,000 people, it was not a big deal. According to the Security Bureau in the inn, It was because many Ming soldiers were very interested in the show performed by our publicity team. They wanted to watch the show, but the higher-ups did not allow it, so they escaped privately. Beta Persei scratched his head and said a reason that was not a reason. What? At this moment, even Yang Qindong was confused by these words. Just to watch a performance, 300 people had disappeared. This was indeed beyond his expectations, and it made him feel like it was child's play. Beta Persei also felt ridiculous when he first heard the news. But since it was reported by the Security Bureau and reported to the sixth young master, it should not be wrong. Who would dare to joke about such a big thing? This was a very serious problem. Yes, that's what was reported. Young master, what do you think? Beta Persei carefully asked Yang Qindong how to deal with it. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he fell into deep thought for a while. After a while, Yang Qindong seemed to have made up his mind and said, Beta Persei, go and see where the publicity team is performing today. Find those people and arrest them all. Okay. Beta Persei became excited when he heard that there was a chance to make a move. By the way, young master, how many people can I bring? Take 10 guards with you, then ask Tiger Ming for a battalion of soldiers. That should be enough. Isn't it just 300 Ming soldiers? By the way, don't make too much noise when you arrest them. Bring them back when you find them. Yang Qindong chuckled. He obviously had a general idea in his mind. Since Ming himself had such a loophole, he would certainly take advantage of it. He wanted to know something from these soldiers. Beta Persei did not know the specific thoughts in Yang Qindong's mind, but since it was an order from the sixth young master, he just had to execute it to the letter. He nodded and agreed. After a while, he turned around and left the inner court. Chapter 762. Brother Beta Persei, what are you doing in such a hurry? Did something good happen? Seeing Beta Persei's anxious look, Ba Daojiang and Peng Yu, who were not on duty, saw it. The relationship between the two of them had always been good, and they were always inseparable. Seeing the two of them, Beta Persei's eyes lit up. The sixth young master gave me a task, and I'm going to complete it. How about this, both of you, and 8 brothers will come together. Fuyun Restaurant was one of the top 5 restaurants in the beginning city. It covered an area of more than 10,000 square meters and had more than 200 tables. In particular, there was a large open space in the middle of the restaurant with a cement floor. It was perfect for performing some large-scale programs. As early as a month ago, Fuyun Restaurant had contacted the publicity department and wanted to invite them to perform in the restaurant. Today was the official day. Since the morning, all the tables in the restaurant had been occupied. Even so, there were still many people who wanted to buy a place to stand with silver. For a moment, the restaurant owner was so happy that he could not close his mouth. At about 9 o'clock in the morning, the staff of the publicity department, who were ready at the back of the restaurant, had already made all the preparations. As the director, Shui Qing kept walking in front of the girls of the publicity department, repeatedly telling them not to be nervous. When the performance started, they just had to perform according to the usual rehearsal. A group of very beautiful girls, each of them wearing the military uniform of the Cold Front, with beautiful berets on their heads, looked valiant and heroic. Today, they were going to perform the scene where the god of war commanded the army to defeat Agadorji of the Tartar tribe. Of course, they could not perform the entire scene. They only chose the moment when the entire army charged. In order to achieve a sufficient stage effect, Shui Qing mobilized a total of 220 girls of the publicity department. In other words, not only were all the 200 students recruited later on, but also some of the cultural backbone staff from Crimson City. This was to create a magnificent scene with many soldiers and generals. Since everyone had to go on stage, Kikich was naturally one of them. Not only did she have to go on stage, but she also had to appear as a character with status and lines. Kikich had a heavy responsibility on her shoulders. The reason why she was able to stand out so quickly was inseparable from her usual hard work, and naturally, it was inseparable from her current identity. As for Beta Persei, after he fell in love with Kikich, he told everything to the sixth young master. After getting his consent, he asked for advice on what to do. Perhaps in his eyes, the sixth young master was omnipotent. The answer given by Yang Qindong was simple: chase after her. To put it bluntly, he had to be thick-skinned, show more concern, and interact more. After a round of pestering, his chances of success would increase by a lot. This was the reason why a good girl was afraid of a pestering man. Beta Persei naturally carried out Yang Qindong's orders to the letter. Whenever he had time, he would come to the publicity office. At the very beginning, it was under the pretext of inspecting work, but after a long time, even Shui Qing knew that this favorite of the sixth young master liked the little girl Kikich. Naturally, he gave the green light. When everyone knew about this matter, Kikich's identity and status also stood out. Even director Shui Qing was polite to her because everyone knew how powerful Pillow Talk was. Fifth Brother Yang had a high position and power in Crimson City, not to mention Brother Beta Persei, who was in a higher position than him. With Shui Qing's care, coupled with her dancing foundation, her figure was very good, and her appearance was very decent. It was impossible for Kikich not to stand out. This time, she was entrusted with a heavy responsibility and arranged to play a very good role. This was not the first time Kikich had gone on stage. A week ago, she had performed for a while in the largest Immortal Abode restaurant in the first city, and her performance at that time was very good. But this did not prevent her from being nervous this time. Before going on stage, she was still constantly taking deep breaths, forcing herself to calm down. The backstage was nervously and orderly preparing. The hall of the Fuyun building was even more crowded. Nya Zhengyi and the others, who were mixed in the crowd, were anxiously waiting. They rushed out of the inn, and then came to the Fuyun building at the fastest speed. At the door, they paid a certain amount of silver. It could be said that after taking out all the silver they had the opportunity to squeeze in. Speaking of which, he was lucky to have some silver on him. Compared to some of the other Biming soldiers who had escaped, most of them were blocked outside the restaurant because they did not have enough silver. If they were in the Datong prefecture, perhaps those soldiers would find ways to cause trouble to express their dissatisfaction. But when they saw the mercenary warriors standing in front of the Fuyun building, they did not have any thoughts of causing trouble. This was other people's territory, and they were facing the legendary elite mercenary warriors. They really did not have the courage to test the law. Finally, it was 9 o'clock in the morning, and the performance began. On the 300-square-meter concrete stage, a loud horn sounded, and 60 to 70 warriors with excellent figures rushed from the backstage to the performance platform. One flag after another was waved in their hands. Just this appearance alone attracted waves of cheers from the people below the stage. Perhaps it was because of the tall and straight figures of the female soldiers, or perhaps it was because the heroic spirit on their faces was not much inferior to the men, or perhaps it was because of their good looks, but they received a full house of applause as soon as they went on stage. Among the people who cheered were Nye Xingyi and some of his companions. Amidst the cheers, the female soldiers with lines began their performance. Through their mouths, they explained the matter of the Tatar army besieging the city with nearly 50,000 soldiers. Then, they showed that the mercenary warriors were not afraid of difficulties, were not afraid of life and death, and were brave enough to fight. After all, it was a performance. Due to the influence of the venue and the surrounding environment, it was impossible to perfectly show every battle. It was just a description of some special battles. But even so, it still made the audience below the stage very excited. Cheers came one after another, and it didn't stop from the beginning. Fuyun restaurant was very lively. Outside the restaurant, Beta Persei arrived with 10 guards and a battalion of 400 soldiers from the independent regiment. Since Beta Persei was personally mobilizing the troops, Deputy Regiment Commander Xian Honghai naturally had to cooperate. He personally led a battalion of soldiers to express his sincerity. When they arrived outside the restaurant, they saw more than 200 soldiers wearing the Ming army uniform outside the door. Arrest them all. Kill those who resist. Beta Persei only glanced at them for a moment before issuing the military order. Immediately, the soldiers led by him rushed towards the Ming soldiers who were still stretching their necks, trying to make a move in the restaurant. Before they could figure out what was going on, these soldiers had become prisoners. Some of the brave Ming soldiers did not resist when they saw that the mercenary warriors were arresting them. They only shouted, "Why are you arresting us? We followed the Ming messengers to your place. You can't treat us like this." Their reply was to gag them and then take them away on the street. They were all tied up and had black cloth gagged over their mouths. More than 200 people did not resist and quickly disappeared outside the restaurant. Beta Persei did not even look at these people. He only stared at the inside of Fuyun restaurant and asked the company commander in charge of the security of the propaganda department how many Ming soldiers entered the restaurant. About 60 or 70 people. They are very easy to recognize. They are all wearing the Ming uniform. The company commander stood at attention, saluted, and replied respectfully, "Good, you guys guard outside. If you find any Ming soldiers who have escaped, take them down immediately. If there is any resistance, you can take measures." Hearing that so many people had entered the restaurant, Beta Persei's eyes darkened, and a murderous aura emanated from his body. This time, there was geekage in the performance. Last night, she had someone send a message to him, hoping that he could come and watch her performance. Just from this point alone, the progress of their relationship was still very smooth. However, Beta Persei did not immediately agree. Following by Yang Qindong's side was a heavy responsibility, and he could not even grasp his own free time. But now, 60 or 70 Ming soldiers were in the restaurant. If they had the intention of destroying this performance, wouldn't Kikich be in danger? He thought that if someone really did that, he would not mind starting a massacre. I hope you guys are just watching a performance. If you have other ideas, you will definitely regret coming to this world. After making up his mind, Beta Persei called the deputy commander of the independent regiment, Xian Honghai. After discussing with him, they decided on a plan to enter the restaurant and capture the people. It's best not to make a move if you can. After all, there are still many people inside who are watching the show. Thinking that the sixth young master was very protective of the people under his rule, Yang Qindong reminded everyone to wait. At this time, inside the Fuyun restaurant, the performance had already lasted for more than an hour and was now coming to an end. They had broken the Tatar army's attack and defeated the enemy. Now was the time to cheer for the victory. The sun sets in the west, the red clouds fly in the sky. The soldiers are shooting, the camp is back, the camp is back. Comrades in arms are as close as brothers. Victory has summoned us together. You are from Tianan, he is from Hebei. We are all brothers of the god of war. One after another, military songs that stirred the hearts of the people resounded on the stage. Under the chorus of the actresses, who were full of five tones, it brought climax after climax to the people present. The people who were encouraged by the performance clapped their hands until they were red, but the applause still continued. Nya Xingyi was also mixed in the crowd. His eyes were shining, and his heart was filled with excitement. After watching this performance, Niezhny was deeply encouraged. Although time was limited, such a novel performance was the first time he had seen in his life. This kind of performance method was unheard of in the future. Even if the time was short, it still made him extremely excited and even deeply affected. Chapter 763. This was a real army. They were fearless in the face of a strong enemy and used all means on the battlefield. The soldiers were united and sincere. Only those who grew up in such an army could be called a real soldier. Only those who grew up in such an army could talk about great ideals. In comparison, the Baiming Datong prefecture he was in was far inferior. They only dared to attack when the enemy was few and far in between, as if they were afraid of angering the other party. When the enemy came in large numbers, they would turn around and flee without even fighting. They didn't have the slightest bit of courage to face difficulties. Anyone with ability and ideas could determine the strength of the enemy. At this moment, Niezhny's eyes were filled with envy, but when he thought about how he was a member of the Baiming army, and a centurion at that, the hot blood that had surged out of his body was forcefully suppressed. Sigh, this is just a dream. In the future, it's better to go back and be a centurion. Sighing like this, Niezhny slowly lowered his head. It was unknown whether he was lamenting his bad luck or lamenting that he was born at the wrong time. At this moment, a strong, murderous aura suddenly attacked him. Niezhny, who had practiced martial arts since he was young and had a good physique, instinctively dodged to the left. A large hand slid down where he was standing just now. Thinking that it was close, he suddenly turned around and saw a soldier in a green military uniform standing behind him. At this moment, both sides looked at each other and saw each other clearly. The soldier from the independent regiment felt a burst of red in his face that his attack had failed. Seeing that most of his comrades had succeeded in one strike, reaching out to control the target he was staring at, but he had failed, this feeling made him very unhappy. Brat, I don't care who you are. If you surrender now, you can still live. If you resist, you'll be asking for trouble. Since the sneak attack had failed, the soldier from the independent regiment didn't hold back and directly put forward his own request. No matter what, Niezhny was still a centurion. How could he allow himself to be captured just because of one sentence? Although he had disobeyed a military order this time, it should be Chiliarch Sudei who came forward to capture him. How could it be a mercenary army that made a move on him? I didn't cause any trouble. Why are you arresting me? He would not allow himself to be captured, but he also did not want to fight with the mercenaries. He knew how powerful they were, and the performance just now had given him a whole new understanding of them. It's not up to you to decide whether or not you committed a crime. Please come back with us. Sensing the unyielding aura emanating from Niezhny, the soldier from the independent regiment didn't choose to attack directly. Instead, he wanted to use words to make Niezhny surrender. That's impossible. I'm a centurion of Baiming. I can't go back with you. Niezhny shook his head. He didn't know what they meant. However, he knew that once he was caught, he would be a captive and would lose his freedom. This was not what he wanted. Then don't blame me. Seeing that Niezhny wasn't listening to them, the soldiers of the independent regiment could only shake their heads. They didn't care that there were still some commoners around them who didn't know what was going on and directly grabbed Niezhny. At this time, the performance was coming to an end. A group of female soldiers from the publicity department were lining up on the stage to take their curtain call. The audience below the stage was enthusiastically applauding, affirming the other party's wonderful performance this time. However, it was at this time that the sound of fighting came from below the stage. attracting everyone's attention for a moment. There were nearly 70 Ming soldiers in the crowd watching the performance. About 60 of them were locked down and subdued at the first moment. After all, the Ming army uniforms they were wearing were too eye-catching. However, there were still 9 people who were resisting, and they all had some strength. Among them, Niezhini's fight was the fiercest and the fastest to end. Bang! A fist collided with a fist, and the soldier from the independent regiment was knocked back 2 steps. Then a long leg kicked him in the chest, causing him to stumble back again. If it weren't for the fact that there were still many commoners standing behind him, he would have fallen to the ground. After repelling the soldiers of the independent regiment, Nia Xingyi instinctively wanted to escape. However, he quickly shook his head helplessly because he didn't know when, but he realized that there were already 4 mercenary soldiers standing beside him. They were staring at him covetously. Suddenly, the sound of fighting came from the crowd. Waves of screams could not be stopped from coming from the Fuyun building. Even on the stage, some of the female soldiers were trembling all over. It was one thing for them to fight and kill on the show, but it was another thing for them to fight in real life. Restlessness began to appear, but it was quickly suppressed. The commoners had already noticed that many mercenary soldiers had appeared on the scene. They were all tall and sturdy, and their eyes were fierce. The appearance of these people gave everyone a sense of relief. Some people were extremely excited. When they watched the performance just now, everything was rehearsed. How could it be as exciting as a real fight between dragons and tigers? Some of the bolder ones even found a good seat and sat down, as if this was the real show they were going to watch today. On the stage, Beta Persei appeared with 10 of his guards. As soon as he appeared, the publicity director Shui Qing hurriedly walked over. "Brother Beta Persei, what's going on?" "It's fine. It's just a small matter." Beta Persei's face revealed a confident expression. He first nodded at Shui Qing, then at Kikij, who was looking at him affectionately. Then he shouted at the top of his lungs, "Everyone, pay attention. I'm Beta Persei from the Yang residence. This place has been controlled by the mercenaries. Everyone, don't panic, and there's no need to be crowded. This matter will be over soon. Everyone, just treat it as a free show." Beta Persei's voice was already loud to begin with, and this shout from his dantian was even louder. Sure enough, with this shout, the crowd quieted down a lot. Although most people didn't know Beta Persei, he said that he was from the Yang residence. Wasn't that someone by the god of war's side? Even the god of war had sent someone. What else did they have to worry about? After Beta Persei revealed his identity, the hot-tempered commoners quickly quieted down. Then, they all looked at the fighting scene with the mentality of watching a show. In the resistance of the 9 people, 4 of them were quickly subdued. Only 5 people, including Nie Xingyi, were still fighting with the independent regiment. Nie Xingyi was fighting 1 against 4, and was already at a disadvantage. With his ability, the soldiers of the independent regiment wouldn't be able to gain any advantage in a one-on-one fight, but it was hard to say if it was 1 against 4. He was having a hard time holding on, and felt that the world was unfair. Seeing that everyone's eyes were on him, he thought of a plan and shouted, "What's wrong? Aren't the mercenaries very powerful? Why are you playing the trick of winning with numbers? Don't you dare to have a fair one-on-one fight with me?" Logically speaking, it was unreasonable to shout like that. On the battlefield, the most important thing was to kill and defeat the enemy. Who cared how many people you had? If you had fewer people, it only proved that you were not capable enough. But this wasn't a battlefield, and there were so many commoners watching. Nie Xingyi's shout attracted a lot of discussion, and actually gained the support of some people. Deputy Commander Xian Honghai, who was commanding the soldiers, was startled when he heard this. He didn't think that there would be such a smart person among the Ming soldiers who knew how to take advantage of the situation. He couldn't help but look at Nie Jingyi and think about what to say. But before Xian Honghai could say anything, Beta Persei, who was standing on the performance stage, had already spoken. On the battlefield, only life and death matters. No one will talk to me about fairness. But since you want a one-on-one fight, I'll fulfill your wish. Ba Daojiang, go test his ability. Be careful, don't kill him. This person has some ability and should be someone with a position. Yes, Brother Beta Persei. Hearing that there was a chance to show off his skills, Ba Daojiang immediately grinned and nodded excitedly. He took the task and strode towards the fighting field. With Beta Persei's shout, the 4 independent soldiers who were attacking at the same time stopped. Their faces were all red. They felt that it was a humiliation that they couldn't take down their opponent after such a long time. But since Brother Beta Persei had given the order, they had no choice but to obey. Beta Persei's shout attracted everyone's attention, and they fell on Ba Daojiang, who was walking down the performance stage step by step. Ba Daojiang came from the underworld, and his boxing skills were unparalleled. Later, he joined Yang Xie and became a guard by the 6th young master's side. He even had the opportunity to receive guidance from Yang Chendong. His strength was no longer the same as before. Now that he had a chance to show off in front of everyone, he would definitely grab hold of this opportunity. First, he strode forward. His target seemed to be Nie Jingyi. However, as he was walking, he happened to encounter a Ming squad leader who was locked in a fight with an independent soldier. When he walked past, he suddenly threw a punch. Caught off guard, the Ming squad leader blocked it with his own fist. However, it was precisely this attack that sent him flying. His body landed 3 to 4 meters behind him before he could land. His face was contorted in pain, and a trace of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. It was obvious that this punch had caused him serious internal injuries. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the independent soldier who was fighting with him stepped forward and subdued him. With just one punch, he had defeated a Ming squad leader who had the ability to fight for a long time. This blow first caused the audience to fall silent. Then, there was a round of applause, expressing everyone's admiration for Ba Daojiang. Ba Daojiang cupped his fists at the audience with a smile on his face. After that, he continued to move forward. Another Ming squad leader was sent flying with a punch. This forced the other 2 Ming soldiers who were still fighting to stop and let themselves be restrained. They had already seen how powerful Ba Daojiang was and knew that they were no match for him. There was no point in asking for trouble. Chapter 764. With that, Nie Jingyi was the only one left standing on the stage. However, his expression was extremely solemn. It was obvious that he had seen through Ba Daojiang's strength. In just a short while, Ba Daojiang had already appeared in front of Nie Jingyi. He then asked in a disdainful tone, "Kid, do you want to take a punch or surrender? Let's fight. It's rare to meet an opponent like you." Facing Ba Daojiang's strong pressure, Nie Jingyi did not choose to retreat. Instead, he moved one of his shoulders, showing that he would not surrender and would fight to the end. All right. Ba Daojiang was still afraid that his opponent would give in. If that happened, he would not be able to enjoy the fight. Now, Nie Jingyi's choice was exactly what he wanted. Laughing loudly, he suddenly dashed to Nie Jingyi's side and threw a punch. Nie Jingyi, who had been observing Ba Daojiang's movements, quickly dodged to the side when he saw the punch coming towards his right shoulder. At the same time, he kicked out with his long leg. Having seen Ba Daojiang's moves, Nie Jingyi would not be stupid enough to take his punch head-on. Boom! The kick landed on Ba Daojiang's waist, and the two separated immediately after the contact. In the first round, Nie Jingyi gained the upper hand with a kick. On the other hand, Ba Daojiang missed his punch and even suffered a kick. It was obvious that he had lost points. Ba Daojiang, can you do it? The sixth young master has said more than once that even a lion uses its full strength to catch a rabbit. If you are careless again, you should retreat. Beta Persei, who was on the stage, saw everything clearly. Nie Jingyi did have some skills, and his body was agile enough. However, the main reason he was kicked was because of his carelessness. Beta Persei's reprimand made Ba Daojiang's face turn red. Brother Beta Persei, give me one more chance. I will definitely take care of this kid. Ba Daojiang was determined, but at the same time, he raised his guard. He rushed forward again, his eyes fixed on Nie Jingyi's body. At this moment, Nie Jingyi's body tensed up. Although he seemed to have gained the upper hand in the first round, the rebounding force of his kick was not weak. He could still feel the numbness in his legs. This also proved the strength of the Eight Paths River. Right now, the other party's heart was filled with caution, staring at him, giving Nie Jingyi the feeling of being stared at by a fierce tiger. It was as if no matter what he did next, he would not be able to avoid the other party's attention, and would not be able to succeed. Nie Jingyi was shocked by Ba Daojiang's aura, and he didn't dare to act rashly. Ba Daojiang didn't care about that. His body moved forward, and his fists rushed forward. His hands were like two dragons emerging from the sea, and it seemed as if he was only attacking and not defending. However, Nie Jingyi could not be fooled by this illusion. Facing the Ba Daojiang that was prepared, if he chose to attack now, he would definitely suffer. After all, their strengths were not on the same line. There was still a huge gap between them. Tong tong tong. Nie Jingyi didn't dare to attack again. Facing the two fists that were rushing towards him, he could only defend. Then, the long fists smashed on his body. Every time they hit, he couldn't help but grimace in pain. It was really unbearable, after a dozen punches like this. When Nie Jingyi felt that he couldn't lift his arms anymore, Ba Daojiang once again used a strong grappling hand. After pressing down on Nie Jingyi's neck, he threw Nie Jingyi out. Nie Jingyi, who was already in a daze from the beating, tried his best to land on his back to reduce the pain he might suffer. Just as he landed and let out a muffled groan, another two soldiers from the independent regiment came over and held him down, completely subduing him. Take away all the troublemakers. Beta Persei, who was standing on the stage, waved his hand. Then he nodded gently at the publicity director Shui Qing and gave Kikich a reassuring look. He then strode out of the Fuyun building surrounded by Peng Yu and the others. Not long after Beta Persei and the others left, Zhang Quan and Su Dei rushed over with dozens of Ming soldiers. However, the answer they received was that Ming soldiers were causing trouble here and had all been taken away. If they wanted to get them, they would have to go to the beginning city's barracks. Zhang Quan didn't dare to go to the beginning city's barracks. With just Su Dei and the dozens of people he brought, they wouldn't even be enough to fill the gaps between the enemy's teeth. Helpless, he thought of Yumian. At this moment, he could only ask for help from the city lord's mansion. Besides, the 300 Ming soldiers were taken away in confusion. They were then taken to the mercenary barracks outside the South City. Here, they were detained separately and interrogated repeatedly. The general idea was that they left the Datong city's diplomatic mission without permission. Were they trying to pry into the secrets of the mercenaries and the city's defense, etc.? Faced with such a crime that could be beheaded, all the Ming soldiers shook their heads like a rattle drum. They were really just curious about the show they were going to star in. That was why they had the courage to rush out of the inn. They really didn't have any other intentions. Putting aside how anxious and defensive the 300 Ming soldiers were, Nie Jingyi, who had been taught a lesson by Ba Daojiang, felt a little dizzy. Then he was taken to a very quiet place with a black mask on his head. The reason why it was very quiet was because he could no longer hear any sound in his ears. After an unknown amount of time, he finally heard footsteps. Then, the black mask on his head was taken off. While feeling the dazzling sunlight in front of him, Nie Jingyi also saw a very young man standing in front of him. The young man had a smile on his face and looked at him with interest. At the same time, he was also sizing up the person who had come. He was young, handsome, and had an indescribable temperament. It felt like he was as heavy as a mountain and as wide as the sea. Even though he was smiling, he still gave Nie Jingyi a great deal of pressure. "Who are you?" When Nie Jingyi saw that Beta Persei, who had previously commanded the troops, was standing beside the young man and looked like a servant, his instincts told him that the young man in front of him was definitely not a simple person. Impudent! How dare you casually ask questions in front of the great Ming's Duke of Loyalty? Before the young man could answer, Beta Persei's roar had already sounded. "Great Ming's Duke of Loyalty." Hearing this, Nie Jingyi's legs went soft, and he knelt on the ground with a plop. This was not to say that he did not have a backbone, but that Yang Qindong's name had already resounded throughout the great Ming. Even in the Datong Prefecture's military camp, the soldiers often talked about this topic when they had nothing to do. In the hearts of the soldiers, this Duke of Loyalty had long been a legend and had become a synonym for strength and invincibility. "You've heard of me?" Seeing Nie Jingyi kneeling in front of him, Yang Qindong's face did not change at all. Perhaps he had long been used to all of this. "Yes, I've heard of the Duke of Loyalty, and know that you're very good at fighting." As Nie Jingyi answered, he was also a little excited. He could actually meet the Duke of Loyalty in person and even talk to him. This was something he had never dared to dream of before. At this moment, Nie Jingyi was like a 7th-ranked county magistrate who had been summoned by the emperor. His heart was only filled with excitement and excitement. My level of fighting is just average. It's mainly because the soldiers under me put their lives on the line that I'm able to achieve glory time and time again." Yang Qindong said with a modest face. Nie Jingyi did not seem to agree with this point of view. Perhaps it was because he had understood some things in the city yesterday, but he could not help but say, "That's also the ability of the Duke of Loyalty. Furthermore, you love your soldiers like your children. To be able to become your subordinate is a matter of happiness and pride. How could they not put their lives on the line?" These words, which seemed to be a bit of bootlicking, caused Yang Qindong to burst into laughter. "Yes, I know you. You're called Nie Jingyi, right? I didn't expect you to be so good with words. In that case, if you were given a chance, would you want to join the mercenary army?" The Duke of Loyalty actually knew him and even took the initiative to recruit him. This honor immediately made Nie Jingyi extremely excited. However, in his mind, he suddenly thought of his mother in the Datong Prefecture. Although his father had died in the battle with the Walla a few years ago, and although he had not married a wife because of his pride, he still had a mother who lived in the Datong Prefecture. If he joined the mercenary army now, what would his mother do? Once the Ming army and the embroidered uniform guards found out, his mother would most likely be doomed. Nie Jingyi's expression constantly changed. Yang Qindong only sized him up and did not have any intention of urging him. After a few breaths of time, Nie Jingyi raised his head and said very seriously, "Duke, although I really envy the treatment of the mercenary army and admire your courage in defeating the enemies of the grassland, I still cannot join the mercenary army." "Is it because of your mother?" Yang Qindong waited for Nie Jingyi to finish speaking before asking with a smile. You know this too? Nie Jingyi's face revealed a surprised expression. How could he have known that not long after they left Datong Prefecture, the intelligence personnel of the Security Bureau received the news? They reported the situation to the higher-ups of the Security Bureau and informed the First City. At the same time, they also began to investigate the entourage, and Nie Jingyi was the main target of the research, so his situation was naturally investigated very clearly. He. Of course I know. I also know that you were born in the military. I know that you are very filial, and I also know that you have very high standards. This year, you are 25 years old and still haven't married. This is not because you can't afford to marry, but because you haven't met the right one. How about it? After watching the performance of our female soldiers today, they all have good figures and good looks. Is there anyone you like? Chapter 765. Yang Qindong smiled faintly as he spoke. Every time he said a word, Nie Jingyi could not help but shiver. The Duke of Loyalty was really omniscient. He even knew the situation of a small centurion like Nie Jingyi. Didn't that mean that the background of the 1,000-man diplomatic group had long been known? Nie Jingyi was still in shock, but when he heard Yang Qindong's next words, he was so shocked that his mouth opened so wide that an egg could be stuffed in. What if I told you that even if you joined the mercenary army, your mother would still be fine, and I would allow you to choose an unmarried female soldier as your wife? What would you choose? Is there such a good thing? Nie Jingyi was indeed shocked and could not help but ask. Ha, I don't think I need to lie to you with my status. Yang Qindong did not answer directly, but this sentence was the answer. What was Yang Qindong's status? Even the Emperor of Ming and the Emperor of Southern Ming were very afraid of him. Even the King of the Grassland, Yes Hen, would be frightened when he heard his name. How could such a person casually joke with a small centurion like Nie Jingyi? As soon as he asked this question, Nie Jingyi knew that he was overthinking. Since there was such a good thing, there was no reason for him to refuse. He immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed 3 times to Yang Qindong and said, Your subordinate, Nie Jingyi, is willing to join the mercenary group and serve the Duke for life. Good. Nie Jingyi finally made his choice. Yang Qindong was overjoyed and walked forward to help him up. Then he looked at him and said, Not bad. Looking at your pure eyes, you must be a man of your words. Since that's the case, I will accept you. Nie Jingyi was convinced by Yang Qindong, but he didn't stay in the beginning city. Instead, he was released along with the 300 Ming soldiers and returned to the inn. In other words, Nie Jingyi was loyal to Yang Qindong, but the nature of his work was different. He had become a chess piece buried in the Datong Prefecture. Normally, he would pass on important military information, but at critical times, he could play a decisive role. Yang Qindong treated Nie Jingyi quite well. He directly proposed that after returning to the Datong Prefecture, there would be a specialized person in charge of his affairs. There would also be a specialized person who would contact him. This way, they could do their best to prevent his identity from being exposed and putting him in danger. At the same time, he also prepared a lot of money for Nie Jingyi. Yang Qindong only had one request, and that was to bribe his superiors as soon as possible, and then continue to be promoted. The position of a mere centurion was still too light. What Yang Qindong wanted was a general who held real power and could come into contact with more secrets. Nie Jingyi also guaranteed this. He did not doubt his own ability. He was still so young and was already a centurion. This was enough to explain everything. If he had gold and silver to clear the way, he was very confident that he would be able to charge up in a short period of time and obtain a higher position. Zhang Quan went to the city lord's mansion, and not long after, Yu Mian personally went to the barracks to communicate. He took back the 300 captured Biming soldiers. What Zhang Quan and Su Dei did not expect was that none of the 300 Biming soldiers returned with injuries. In other words, they were only interrogated when they went to the mercenary barracks, and were not interrogated. On this point, Su Dei was very emotional. He felt that the mercenaries were indeed an army that followed the rules, and only this kind of army would be able to fight against the Mongol cavalry and win every battle. Humph! They are just ordinary soldiers. How could they be valued by the mercenaries? Zhang Quan had a different opinion. He felt that it was because the captured soldiers were too low level, that they did not attract the interest of the mercenaries. This was the end of the farce. According to Nie Jingyi's previous thoughts, neither Zhang Quan nor Su Dei punished the 300 soldiers, and only gave them a warning. It was very reasonable that the law could not punish the masses. After the farce, Zhang Quan and Su Dei went to the city lord's mansion again. They had wasted another day for nothing, and the negotiations still had to continue. In the Yang mansion, Yang Qindong was deep in thought with his eyes closed. Beta Persei stood at the side, not daring to say a word. Only when there was movement outside the door and Tiger's Mane's figure appeared did Beta Persei leave the house with light steps. What's going on? What happened? Tiger's Mane heard from the guards that the 6th young master did not even have dinner after returning from a trip. He hurriedly rushed over from the barracks. At this moment, he was naturally asking Beta Persei, who had been staying by the 6th young master's side. This is hard to say. Beta Persei shook his head, not knowing how to answer. What do you mean by hard to say? Just say what you have to say. Tiger's Mane glared at Beta Persei, as if he was questioning him. Tiger's Mane's loyalty to Yang Qindong was naturally unquestionable. If there was only one person in the army who did not betray Yang Qindong, it must be Tiger's Mane. Because of this, Beta Persei also trusted him very much. He immediately told him about how the 6th young master left the mansion and privately went to the barracks to meet Nie Jingyi, Tiger's Mane. As soon as the young master appeared, Nie Jingyi was subdued, but at the same time, he also said some things about the Datong mansion. According to him, the upper echelons of Biming have been saying bad things about the young master in the army. They have always said that the young master is a traitor and have been on guard against him. And I heard that many soldiers in the Biming army believe this. Beta Persei's answer finally made Tiger's Mane understand what had happened. Before, he didn't know, so he wasn't worried. But now that he knew, he smiled and said, I thought it was something big. Don't worry. Young master is very broad-minded. He definitely won't worry about such a small matter. Yes, the young master will not worry about such a small matter. But not long ago, the Security Bureau sent a report about the Biming Imperial Court. I heard that many people there have put forward a proposal saying that they want to order the Nuergon Du Sea to cut off our supply route from the sea. What they really dare. Hearing this, even Tiger's Mane's expression changed, and then he glared at Beta Persei. Why don't you say it all at once? You have to say it one by one. Humph. After saying this, Tiger's Mane strode into the house. As soon as he entered the room, he came in front of Yang Qindong and said, Young master, don't worry, I'll immediately take the independent regiment to the Nuergon Du Sea. Didn't they want to cut off our supply route? Then we'll flatten them first. Yang Qindong, who had been sitting on the chair with his eyes closed, opened his eyes at this moment. The independent regiment has such a strong combat power that they can destroy the entire Biming army in the Nuergon Du Sea with their strength alone. They can also control every city and ensure the safety of our supply route. We can't do it. Even though Tiger's Mane was so confident, he could not help but say, with a bitter face at this moment, the intelligence of the Security Bureau had long recorded that there were many Biming guards in the New Durgan-Du area. Their military strength was about hundreds of thousands of people, and they were very widely distributed. The furthest two guards were thousands of miles apart. With such a large territory, how could an independent regiment occupy it so easily? Not to mention the independent regiment. Even if the army in the beginning city was sent over now, they might be able to defeat the Biming guards, but it was impossible to occupy that place and maintain the stability there. That place was too big, and there were too many guards. Unless they had enough military strength, they would not be able to control it. Not to mention, Yang Qindong was not ready to fall out with Biming. According to him, whether it was Biming or Southern Ming, they were all made up of Han people. In the future, if he wanted to lead the Han people to the top of the world, a strong population base was essential. Unless it was necessary, he did not want to make things difficult for the Han people, and he did not want to be enemies with the Han army. Otherwise, this was equivalent to digging his own foundation. In a situation where he did not want to fight, if the Biming imperial court really ordered to block the supply route, Yang Qindong would really suffer. After all, the ability of the beginning city to self-produce was too low. If there was no continuous supply of resources from Qiqian City, not to mention developing on the grassland, even surviving would be a problem. Tiger's Mane did not speak, and Yang Qindong once again fell into silence. He now needed to think of a way to stop the Biming imperial court from giving orders to the New Durgan-Du area. As for how to do this, it was truly a difficult matter. The negotiation was still going on in the city lord's mansion, and it was getting smoother. Perhaps it was because Zhang Quan's attitude was very firm, but in the end, Yu Mian still took a step back. He did not have the intention to ask the other party for military pay. Of course, Zhang Quan also did not mention that the beginning city would be under the management of the Biming imperial court. In the end, the two sides reached an agreement, and that was to issue a joint statement to the outside world that the Datong prefecture and the beginning city were allies. If one side was in trouble, the other side would unconditionally send troops to support. The agreement was finally reached. Presumably, after knowing this news, Yes Hen had to consider more things when he wanted to take action. This made Zhang Quan seem to be very satisfied. After completing his mission, he rejected Yu Mian's suggestion to stay in the first city for a few more days and left the city with the 1,000 guards he had brought with him. After Yu Mian sent Zhang Quan off, he strode to the Yang mansion to meet Yang Qindong. In the hall of the Yang mansion, Yang Qindong looked at the joint statement made by the two sides and smiled. It's just a piece of waste paper. Yang Qindong said this for a reason. The statement only said that the two sides were allies. If one side was in trouble, the other side would provide support. However, it did not specify how many reinforcements would be sent. In other words, if one side was really in trouble, the other side could send 10,000 people, 1,000 people, or even 100 people. With such a big loophole in front of him, Yang Qindong did not believe that Yu Mian and Zhang Quan would not be able to see it. However, both sides did not point it out. This already meant a lot. Chapter 766. Ignoring such a big loophole and pretending not to see it, this already showed that both sides were just putting on a show. They just wanted to use the tiger's skin to scare the other side. However, Yang Qindong could also understand that information was so undeveloped. Even if one side was attacked, by the time the news reached the other side's ears, it would be too late. What was the point of sending reinforcements? Yu Mian naturally understood this logic. He also understood that Zhang Quan only wanted righteousness. He wanted to use the first city to deter some of the Mongolian troops who wanted to attack the Datong prefecture. As for sending reinforcements, it was better to forget about it. In the past few days, he had heard more than once that the mercenaries' food was so good that it was not much worse than that of a eunuch like him. Just the food alone was something that the Datong prefecture could not afford. In any case, the negotiation finally came to an end. Yu Mian could be considered to have completed a political task. While he relaxed, he also focused his attention on another matter. He looked at Yang Chendong and asked, "Sixth young master, have you really made up your mind to take over Tulu City?" "Yes, I have to take over that place. Previously, I sent people from the Security Bureau to investigate the situation there. The information has been reported back. There are only 10,000 Tatar troops that belong to Tuachuobuhua. 5,000 of them are infantry. In front of the mercenaries, it is not worth mentioning." Yang Chendong admitted, with a smile. Since he could say this, it was obvious that he had made up his mind. Although Yu Mian was the governor, his power was much lower than Yang Chendong's. There were some things that he only had the right to suggest, but not the right to make decisions. Now that he heard that Yang Chendong seemed to have made up his mind, he carefully said, "Sixth young master, Tulu City is a barrier to the northwest of Baiming. It is also a buffer zone between us. Once we break through there, there will be no obstacles between us. We can see swords and spears at any time." "Yes, what I want is to see swords and spears at any time. Let me tell you this. I have received news that the Baiming Imperial Court is considering giving an order to New Gondusi to cut off our logistical supply route. If this is the case, what about the army's provisions? What about the security of the first city? They force me to do this." Yang Chendong said this with a helpless look. After he finished speaking, he said something that shocked Yu Mian. "This time, not only do I want to break through Tulu City, but I also want to personally go to Baiming's capital. There are some people that I want to meet." No. Yu Mian was really frightened this time. He said with a panicked expression, "Sixth young master, a gentleman does not stand under a dangerous wall. If the Baiming Imperial Court really wants to deal with you, if something happens in their territory, the entire Yangxia Empire will be in chaos." Seeing that Yu Mian was so anxious, Yang Chendong was very gratified. At least this meant that the other party was really looking out for him. He said confidently, "Don't worry. As long as we occupy Tulu City, it is equivalent to opening the door to the northwest of Baiming's capital. Unless the other party has made the decision to fight to the death with the mercenaries, they will not dare to touch me casually. Besides, I've already given orders to the Security Bureau and Crimson City. Some elite Cold Vanguard soldiers will enter the capital as soon as possible. A regiment of elite Cold Vanguard soldiers should be enough to intimidate the enemy." Yang Chendong waved his hand nonchalantly. To others, entering Baiming's capital at this time might be extremely dangerous. However, to Datsang, Yang Chendong was really nothing. Unless the other party could kill him in an instant, as long as he was given a little time to react, no one would be able to kill him. Yang Chendong was so confident that he made a decision. Yu Mian knew that there was nothing he could say. The only thing he could do was to take care of the city during the time when the sixth young master was not in the first city. Let this city develop quickly, and not let people worry about it would be a great merit. And just 3 days after Yu Mian and Yang Chendong met, there was a big movement in the first city's military camp. The 3 divisions of the Cold Front and the fully replenished Jurchen cavalry regiment finally set off. This time, they would leave the first city and go all the way north, straight to the Siberia area controlled by the Golden Horde. They would fight the so-called Golden Family head-on. And for this expedition, Yang Qindong had provided 200 carriages of military supplies. In the Yang residence, in front of Yang Qindong stood the commander of the 3 divisions Wu Sheng, the political commissar Qinbo, the 3rd Regiment Chanyang, and the commander of the Jurchen Cavalry Regiment, Yi La. Yang Qindong looked at Wu Sheng and the other 3 and asked in a deep voice, "This expedition is of great significance. I believe that all the grassland tribes will pay attention to you. My request is also very simple. You have to show the power of the mercenaries. You have to beat the enemy until they can't eat or sleep when they hear your name. Do you have the confidence to complete this mission?" "Yes." Naturally, Wu Sheng and the other 3 replied in unison. "Good. I also have confidence in you. But I still want to tell you that along the way to the north, you can attack while occupying some important military positions. If necessary, you are allowed to expand your troops. I ask you to fight steadily. 200 carriages of logistics supplies won't last long for the army. You must have a safe supply route behind you. This is also the foundation of your survival. You understand?" Yang Qindong knew that war was about money and logistics. In modern warfare, a cannonball could cost tens of millions of dollars or even more. Even a gun could cost $1 or more. This was also why countries often negotiated with each other when they encountered problems. Unless it was absolutely necessary, they would not easily use force. But at this time, although the army did not have heavy firearms to consume, the soldiers still needed money to eat, drink, and defecate. Without sufficient rations as a foundation, it was easy for the morale of the army to become unstable and problems would arise. Fight steadily and step by step. This is what we ask of you. I will also be here waiting for the battle report of your victory. At the end of the meeting, after Yang Qindong said these words, the 3 divisions and the Nuzhen Cavalry Regiment, a total of about 10,000 people, left the first city and headed north. At this time, it was still snowing heavily outside. Logically speaking, such weather was not suitable for mobilizing troops. Even the escorting of food supplies had brought great difficulties. However, Yang Qindong did not want to wait any longer. A person's life was limited. If he wanted to achieve his life goal, he had to seize every minute. As for the heavy snow, he would have to experience it eventually, instead of slowly adapting to it in the future. It was better to start now. "Young master, it's snowing heavily everywhere. Some places don't even have roads. It's really troublesome for the army to move." Tiger's Mane stood beside Yang Qindong on the tower of the first city. He looked at the back of the army that was gradually disappearing and said with some emotion, "Yes, it's a little troublesome. However, a truly strong army will not stop because of the bad weather. We mercenaries want to create miracles and make everything impossible possible." Yang Qindong first nodded in agreement, then said in a very heroic tone. After saying this, he looked at the surrounding generals. "Let's go. Since everyone is here, let's have a meeting to discuss the matter of attacking Talu City." Talu City was also known as Talu City. It was west of the bordered white banner of Inner Mongolia. Ming Jin Yuzi's record of the Northern Expedition, Yonghua 8th year, 1410, Zhu Di's Northern Expedition. Jin River moraine is more than 10 miles away. There is an ancient city near the road. The instructions said, "This is Talu City. I have hunted here." The southeast area of Talu City would be the future Zhangjiago. That place was already in Hebei. From there, it would be much closer to the capital of Baiming. In other words, once they occupied this place, it was equivalent to setting up a Damocles sword in the northwest of Baiming. It could fall at any time and act as a deterrent. The meeting was held in the newly built war room in the city lord's manor. In front of a huge sand table, Yang Qindong divided the work among his subordinates. City Lord Yumian, you will remain in the city for this battle. You will be in charge of the law and order of the city. There is also the matter of the army's rations. It won't be long before the new batch of resources from Crimson City arrives. You will also need to register them. Commander Suhi, this time, your Tatar cavalry will be the vanguard. I know that AMU Gulang, who is guarding Talis City, is your old friend. If possible, it would be best if you could take down the city without fighting. On the other hand, if the other side is stubborn, then don't blame us for taking action. At that time, blood will flow like rivers. You must be prepared for this. Tiger's Mane, you will lead your independent regiment and follow closely behind Commander Suhi. Once the battle starts, you can provide support at any time. Oh, right. You can choose 2 100mm cannons from the warehouse in the city to be used when sieging the city. Commander Lujua, you will lead the 2nd Cavalry Regiment at the back. They will be in charge of transporting the rations. At the same time, the 3 newly built regiments will be under your command. However, this time they are not going to fight, but to build roads. In the warehouse, City Lord Yumian has already prepared shovels, brooms, and other items for you. He wants you to clear a slightly flat road to Talis City. The 3 new regiments are mainly responsible for protecting the safety of our rear flank. Be careful of the attacks of the Tatar cavalry on the nearby Saihan Mountain. After saying this, Yang Chendong seemed to have thought of something. He looked at Yumian and said, when the next batch of supplies arrives, the corresponding cement factory equipment and staff will also be in place. We can't rely on Crimson City for everything, especially cement. It's too heavy and troublesome to transport. If First City wants to develop, we still need some factories. This cement factory is in the first batch of construction. We need to build it earlier. Once we can make our own cement, many roads will need to be rebuilt in the future. You have to worry about this matter. Chapter 767. Yes, 6th young master, I will remember it. Yumian nodded heavily. Finally, Yang Chendong's gaze fell on Zhui Feng, the leader of the 1st Cavalry Regiment. You don't have to participate in this battle. You are mainly responsible for the safety of the origin city. If there are any small people who want to make a move, it will depend on your performance. In addition, your regiment is also responsible for receiving supplies. If there is a need, there are still 7,000 captives in the logistics regiment. Although they are usually coolies, some of them used to be cavalry and can play a role on the battlefield. If there is any danger, they can be used. Is there any problem? Reporting to the 6th young master, there is no problem. But the next time there is a battle, can you not let our regiment stay at home? Zhui Feng's face had a hint of pleading. The army was mobilized, and only their regiment was left. This made it very difficult for him to explain to his brothers and officers. Okay, I will agree to your request. Yang Chendong's face was full of smiles. He liked this kind of fighting spirit army. If once a battle broke out, everyone wanted to retreat and hoped that others would go to war. Then this army would not be far from defeat. Speaking of attacking Tulu City, it was not a matter of 1 or 2 days of preparation. Basically, the regimental leaders knew about this news half a month ago. According to Yang Chendong, it was already the end of November. He was still preparing to celebrate the new year in the capital of Ming, so this matter could not be delayed. Although the new year of 1453 was at the beginning of February, it was still very tense with only 2 months. Once the battle meeting started, the regimental leaders went back to make preparations. And the most excited were the 3 new regiments that had just joined the mercenary army. A regiment had 5 battalions, and a battalion had 4 companies and 400 people. a total of 6,000 soldiers of the new regiment, had only trained for less than 2 months. Suddenly, a great battle was about to break out. The soldiers who wanted to contribute were all very excited. At noon, the regiment gave the order to set off early tomorrow morning. Every soldier had half a day off and could go back to accompany their families. Batu left the barracks excitedly and returned to his home in the beginning city. As soon as he entered the house, he saw his mother Badama and sister Kikij waiting for him. In addition, Beta Persei, who would soon become his brother-in-law, was also there. Batu, are you afraid? As soon as she saw her brother come back, Kikij hurriedly greeted him. The relationship between the brother and sister had always been very good. From this point of view, it was already confirmed. Although Mother Badama didn't say anything, her loving and caring gaze had already proved everything. Mother, sister, Yang, second brother, I'm not afraid. When it came to Beta Persei, Batu really wanted to call him brother-in-law, but he knew that this relationship had not been made public yet, and only a limited number of people knew about it. Besides, he didn't want his comrades to think that he had entered the army through nepotism, so it was easier for him to address Beta Persei as brother. Haha, how is it? I told you that Batu wouldn't be afraid. Beta Persei, who had been waiting for the news, suddenly laughed out loud. This laughter caused Kikij to be a little dissatisfied. She glared at Beta Persei coquettishly. Do you think everyone is like you, only excited when talking about war? This is the first time our Batu is going to the battlefield. Sigh, it's okay if it's the first time. There's always a first time for everything. Besides, the new regiment is only responsible for repairing the road at the back. There won't be any danger. This time, the 6th young master wants them to feel the atmosphere of war. Beta Persei waved his hand indifferently. He really didn't think that the new regiment was going to war, so naturally there was nothing to worry about. At this time, Badama finally spoke. Beta Persei is right. Batu is going to feel the atmosphere of the battlefield this time. They haven't been training for long. I'm afraid that even if they want to go to the front line, the god of war won't agree. Sigh, that's right. Beta Persei chuckled. In exchange, Kikij rolled her eyes. Similar things happened in other families as well. Basically, the family members were a little worried, but these new recruits were all excited. It was as if they were really going to the battlefield and killing the enemy. Early the next morning, the army that had been preparing for more than 10 days set off. The first to attack was the 3,000-strong Tatar cavalry regiment. Commander Su, he rode a tall horse and entered the city from the south gate. Then he passed through the streets and led the army out of the west gate under the cheers of the people. They went straight in the direction of Tulu city. After Suhi's Tatar cavalry regiment, the mercenaries walked on the streets one after another, and then went out of the city to the battlefield. This was specially requested by Yang Qindong. He wanted all the soldiers to experience such a welcome ceremony and let the people in the city feel the strength of the mercenaries. In this way, if there is a shortage of soldiers in the future, more young men will sign up to join the army. Tulu City, originally a territory controlled by the Tatars, the general Amu Gulang, who was guarding here, also belonged to the Tatars. He was a general under Tuachuo Buhua. When translated into Chinese, Amu Gulang meant peace. In fact, as his name suggested, he had been very safe. Even when Yeshen joined forces with Agador to attack Tuachuo Buhua not long ago, he was very safe in Tulu City. So much so that even after such a long time had passed, no one had come to cause trouble for him. All of this naturally could not be attributed to a name, but because of Tulu City's special geographical location. From here to the southeast was Baiming's territory, and it would not be too far before reaching the capital of Ming. It could be said that this was a dividing line, completely separating Ming from the Mongol tribes. In such an environment, it was like being roasted on a fire, and they could be attacked by the Ming army at any time. Because of this, it was the safest place. Even Agadorji didn't have any ideas about it. Ming was fully developing their military and open up their commerce. It was said that they also wanted to open up a navy and build a defense line. Before they were fully prepared, they would definitely not recklessly start a war with the Mongol tribes of the Central Plains. Not to mention, the Hatao region, not far from Datong, was already occupied by Yeshin's Wara. Ming was afraid that someone would attack them from Tulu City. Who would be so blind to find trouble with them? In such an environment, Amu Gulong was very comfortable and in a good mood. When the heavy snow danced in the sky, his hanging heart was even more relieved. In such weather, no army would be willing to move. This was also the safest time of the year. However, during this period, which was regarded as the safest, there was suddenly news that the beginning city's army was moving in the direction of Tulu City. They had already passed by Saihan Mountain, and the front army was only 100 miles away. As soon as the news came out, Amu Gulong, who was resting in his residence, was shocked. He quickly called his deputy, General Shi Bei, to discuss how to deal with it. Amu Gulong was not tall and could only be said to have an ordinary figure. In comparison, Deputy General Shi Bei was burly and looked like a fierce general. When the two of them met and listened to the report from the scouts in the room, their expressions became grave and deep at the same time. Amu Gulong's brows were tightly knitted together. What was going on in the beginning city? The reports from the scouts had already made it very clear. For this reason, he had even sent scouts into the city to investigate. Facing the beginning city, which had opened 4 gates and looked like it was not defended at all, they did not seem to be worried about any scouts coming to inquire about the news. Therefore, the scouts went and returned quickly. A series of titles such as the Duke of Loyalty, the God of War, the Messenger of Tungri, and a series of things that had happened recently poured into Amu Gulong's ears. It was precisely because he understood more that he felt more afraid of the beginning city. Even Agar Dorji's 50,000 cavalrymen were wiped out. With the 5,000 cavalrymen and 5,000 infantrymen in the city, could they really defend the city and block the attack of the God of War's army? Amu Gulong's heart was not confident. After hesitating for a moment, he asked tentatively, General Shi Bei, what do you think? We can't defend it. After hesitating for a while, Shi Bei gave his answer. Yes, we can't defend it, but we can only defend it. I have received Great Khan Tuachuo's kindness. At this time, there's no reason for me to give up the city. If they have the ability, they can just kill me. Amu Gulong gritted his teeth and made his final decision. Seeing that the commander was determined to die, Shi Bei hurriedly comforted him. General, a real man knows when to yield and when to stand tall. I believe that even if the Great Khan knows, he won't blame you. It's not the same. Let's not talk about whether the Great Khan will blame me or not. If I surrender, my conscience will be uneasy for the rest of my life. A person living in this world has to hold on to something. All right, there's no need to say any more. I've made up my mind. I will lead 5,000 cavalrymen to fight to the death with the enemy. If I unfortunately die in battle, Shi Bei, you, and 5,000 infantrymen don't think about holding on. You can choose to surrender. This is my order. Amu Gulong's moral character was still very good. He didn't have to force his subordinates to do anything. On the contrary, he gave them a way to live. This also made Shi Bei very excited. General, don't worry. If you really die in battle, I will definitely collect your bones and bury you so that you can return to the foot of Tungri. Thank you very much. Amu Gulong cupped his fist and said. 2 days later, under the city of Tulu, the vanguard of the mercenaries, the Tatar group, arrived. According to the order of Yang Qindong, He called for a fight at the foot of the city, saying that he wanted to see Mu Gulang to talk about the old days. Both of them were generals under the Tatar forces. Naturally, they knew each other before, but their relationship wasn't very deep. This time, when the two sides met, at the beginning, Amu Gulang said to He with a look of contempt, "So it's General Su. Ha, I didn't expect you to still be alive. What's wrong? When your master Agadorji escaped, didn't he order you to cover the retreat? Did you defeat the mercenaries?" You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.